Disc 7.
Staffe follows Alicia Flint down the wide staircase from Flounder's office and into the bright hallway, lit by the low, setting April sun. Particles of dust dance in the golden shafts that beam in through the weeping willows outside. His mind flits. He is thinking how grand Leslie Crawford's scheme might be. He thinks also of his sister Marie, and Cathy Killick too. And if the future bodes ill for some who cross Leslie Crawford's path, then what of the past? He says, "The past." Alicia comes towards him, says, "You all right?" "Just tired." "You need a lift to the station." He nods, already elsewhere. 28. On the return to London, Staffe had considered what he had failed to see. Clearly, Crawford had known Zoe Bright for years. Clearly, Crawford could easily have known Vernon Short for many years. He has been pointing the wrong way. He should be facing the past. Now he regards Bridget Lamb. "How long have you been in the House of the Holy Innocents, Bridget?" They're in Leadengate Station, and Bridget's bottom lip is red and ragged. This business has well and truly caught up with her, and whilst she has managed to stifle tears, she has chewed at her lip non-stop for half an hour. Staffe recalls that her sister Kerry had done precisely the same, though in a more extreme fashion. "Should we take a break?" says Pulford, feeling Bridget's distress. "As soon as I'm satisfied that Bridget has told us everything about Leslie Crawford." "I don't know the woman, I keep telling you," says Bridget. "And I keep telling you I don't believe you. Until I do, you're staying." "Fine," says Bridget, crossing her arms, re-steeling herself. "There's a woman in Liverpool about to have a baby. Do you want her to go through what happened to Kerry?" Bridget stares at her feet, crinkles her nose. Staffe says she'll be just like the others. Crawford tells them one thing and does another. "The others?" says Bridget, her eyes wide. "You don't have to say anything," says Bridget's lawyer. But it's too late. "You know about the others," says Staffe. "What others?" "You thought you were the only ones, did you? Did Leslie tell you that she could save your unborn flesh and blood? The life that was knitted in the womb?" "What?" Bridget looks confused. "Grace is the closest you will ever get to having your own bloodline." "No." "Did Crawford make you feel special?" "Well, you're not, Bridget. You're just one of many." Bridget shakes her head, looks at her solicitor, who drags her chair closer, whispers confidences straight into her ear. Pulford says, into the tape machine, "Interviewee's legal representative providing confidential counsel." "Did Leslie Crawford tell you she had done it before?" "I don't understand," says Bridget, to her solicitor. "My client is tired. We need a break." "Did Leslie talk about Vernon Short to you? Did she mention his bill? Is that what made the difference for you?" "That's God's will. It will stop the suffering. Anybody with a soul can see that." "How many were there before Kerry?" Bridget shakes her head. "I suppose Leslie showed you the babies she had saved. Not so different from the soul you lost." Staffe and Bridget gaze awkwardly at each other. "I'm sorry, Bridget, I can see how it would hurt. To learn what Kerry was going to do, simply because it didn't suit." Bridget focuses, as if appraising him for truth. He waits for a sign, but she becomes expressionless. For a moment, Pulford and the solicitor look at their notes. Staffe and Bridget are in a cocoon, as if alone in the world. He whispers softly, "Were there others, Bridget?"
How should I know? Why should I care?
Because you know how precious life is. She smiles as if coming round. Was Kerry having twins? He asks.
What makes you think she'd tell me if she was?
I wonder, says Staffe, smiling back. When Staffe sees Josie in the back snug of the hand, he gasps. Somehow, here in the soft dancing light from the hearth, Josie's injuries seem so much worse. The flesh beneath her right eye is puffed up and plum-coloured, and her knuckles are bruised and grazed. He tries not to be too sympathetic, knows that would make her feel worse, but he can't help putting his arm around her. He lets the hug linger for an extra moment. She winces, says, I'm a bit tender. Any chance we can finger Tommy Given for doing this to me? Staffe shakes his head. No forensics, no witnesses, and half a dozen sworn alibis. He was with his beautiful wife, don't you know?
Bastard.
We'll get him one way or the other. Get this. He's Kerry's uncle.
What?
Kerry didn't know he was.
So he's related to Grace?
Staffe nods, pensive. And Bridget. But Bridget doesn't know.
Ah.
Josie takes out some papers.
That reminds me. You wanted me to check those numbers from the booths on the New North Road. Guess what?
There is life in her eyes now, and they sparkle in the fireside glow.
I cross-checked the unidentified mobile number to all the other numbers on the case data universe. That same mobile number Sean Degg called, 3 hours before he died, appears on Malcolm and Bridget Lamb's landline records.
So, the mystery mobile is a friend of Bridget's.
Or a foe she keeps close.
I could kiss you, says Staffe.
Don't,
says Josie.
I'm embarrassed enough about facing that lot in the station. I'm a laughingstock.
No, you're not.
You don't mean that.
We'll laugh about it one day. Now, how do you fancy some evening work? Josie puts down the phone. It is the last of the calls on her list. The sun had dropped low, and the computers gloam in the leaden gate dusk. Josie, Staffe, and Pulford have the place to themselves.
It's a blank, sir.
The Givens, it seems, aren't registered at any of the clinics within 8 miles of Cobham. And how about the adoption agency, Pulford?
They're getting back to me, sir.
Tonight?
They promised.
So, let's employ the time well. He points at the boxes of missing persons files. You take those, Pulford. Arrange them in date order. And, Chancellor, shout out the medical appointments, clinic by clinic, in date order.
I couldn't get them all, sir.
We'll take what we've got, and we'll start with City Royal. Pulford and Josie look at each other behind Staffe's back, neither quite sure whether he has lost it or not. 3 hours later. It is dark, and Leadengate echoes with the silence of absent police. Pulford's missing persons files cover 2 desks in piles the size of wine cases. Josie is looking through the admissions records of City Royal Hospital and all the other antenatal clinics in the city that they could requisition. 9 out of 16 complied with the request for their appointments data. None would release patient records without the requisite court orders. Staffe paces the room, wondering what to do with his theories. Sabine Given wasn't on the radar of any of her local clinics. One of them, the Orchard in Stoke Davenant, said that their general practice showed a record of having treated a Giselle Given, though they would not say what it concerned. And yes, they recalled that the mother was pregnant. A beautiful-looking woman. They remembered mother and daughter well. No, they didn't think it odd that the mother wasn't registered there for antenatal treatment. The phone rings, and Pulford reaches across the paper piles.
He takes the call standing. It is the adoption agency, and he checks his watch, sees it is gone 10. The poor administrator on the other end sounds crotchety. She says, "The result is positive."
Really?
"The Givens made an application 3 years ago. I can't see any more. All I need to know is whether they were accepted. I can't say. Look, if I need to use this as evidence, I will come back to you with the authorization, but a child is involved here. Can you give me any kind of indication?" "Not really." "A newborn baby is missing. You're part of that investigation." "Oh, Christ." "I won't breathe a word," says Pulford. "The application didn't see its fruition. It's all I can say." "Thank you. Thank you very much." Pulford returns the phone to its cradle and claps his hands together. "Given applied to go on the adoption agency's books 3 years ago, but they declined him. They can't say why." "Too old?" says Josie.
"Too bloody evil," says Staffe.
"Why would he apply for adoption if he's got a daughter?" says Josie.
"Well, he didn't then. Giselle isn't 3 yet."
"They must have had her soon after."
"Or not."
"Is Sabine the type to have an affair?"
"I don't think she'd risk it," says Staffe. "And from what I've seen of them together, she loves him to bits. God knows why."
"I don't get it."
"We need to crack on with the data match."
"We're only halfway through."
"I'll get coffees, shall I?" says Staffe.
"How noble,"
says Josie, putting the pad of her index finger in the margin where she left off and running down to see the pattern of attendance of each woman in the register. When the woman reappears only once or twice, Staffe checks the name against registered births. If there is no registered birth, Pulford checks to see if the woman appears as a missing person. As Staffe comes back with the coffees, Josie says, "Soraya Constantine, last appointment, February 2009. Staffe scans through the births register. "Son, born 12th of May, father's name, Emmanuel Constantine." Josie sighs and leans back, scrunches her eyes shut to try to find some perspective. She reminds herself that every name that results in a birth is a thing to rejoice. "Thank God." "What?" says Pulford, looking across. "Ah, I see, right. But don't go thinking you've moved into the good news department." The night outside is a deep indigo, and they can all see themselves reflected back in the windows by strip light. Staffe fails to find the next name in the births register, nor is the mother-to-be in Pulford's missing persons stacks. This is what Staffe has designated a possible, and will have to be followed up, should the inspector have his application for overtime granted. Pulford says, "Another needle for the bloody haystack." "They're not needles, Pulford. They're lives." "I know, sir." Pulford walks along the piles he has made, each for a 3-month period going back 5 years. 20 stacks. "Bagshot," says Josie. "Have you got an Emily Bagshot? Last appointment at City Royal, July 2008. Staffe checks the births. "No birth," he says, waiting as Pulford drags the relevant stack onto his lap. He has lost count of the number of times they've done this. "She'll have got married and changed her name, or not gone the full course." Ah. He stops, squints at the page in his hand. He holds it up, closer to his face. He stands, and the pile that was on his lap falls to the floor, scattering everywhere. "Pulford?" "Bagshot," he says, quiet as a scolded child. "Emily?" says Josie.
Emily May. Born 1990. Reported missing 18th of July 2008. Last known address 33 Bevan House. The Attlee estate, says Staffe, moving towards Pulford, reading the paper over his sergeant's shoulder. Report filed by a Robert Hutchison, born 1987 and of the same abode. Case open. He goes to Josie, who is standing with the extract from the City Royals appointments register held out in front of her. Frozen to the spot, she looks at the scanned information on the hospital register. He says, "Can you get down to the City Royal? See if our Emily had a consultation about a termination." Slowly, Josie shakes her head. "I don't want to, sir. I don't think I can. Not now." She's pale and done in. She reaches for the desk, sits heavily in the chair, blowing out her cheeks. "You don't think—" "You come with me, then. We'll make a call on this Hutchison fellow." "I'll check the hospital," says Pulford. Josie says, "Do you think there'll be others?" "God knows. If it's anything like Kerry Degg, there won't be any records of her appointments," says Pulford. "For her sake, then, let's hope there are. And let's pray we find her and Hutchison curled up like love's young dream up on the Attlee." "And if they're not? What if she's not there?" But Staffe has turned his back, is disappearing out of the door. Part 4. 29. Staffe looks across the Attlee estate, can see into the flats on the Bevins' lower decks opposite. It's where they had found Bobo Bogdanovich last year, hoisted from the neck by his foes. People die all the time in these blocks, and anything sinister usually crosses Staffe's path. No matter what he does, the harm that man wreaks on man still comes. But you can save one life. In his time he has done more than that. He counts back. But sometimes, the closer you get, the more damage you can do. Josie knocks again, and a shadow scrolls across the living-room window. They each take a fraction of a step back. "Robert Hutchison," says Staffe as the door opens. "I've done nothing. Don't know nothing neither." He's wearing jeans and his chest is bare. Josie shows her card, says, "Can we come in?" "It's late. I've got company." "Emily?" Hutchison's eyes flit and he takes a step out, even though he's barefoot. "No, it's not. She fucked off." "With your baby?" "Rob!" calls a woman, distant within the flat. "Where is Emily?" hisses Hutchison, pulling the door almost closed as he steps fully onto the deck. "Was it your baby, Rob?" says Staffe. "The fuck you want?" "Did she go of her own accord?" says Josie. "Look, I never done nothing to that girl. She's carrying my baby, for fuck's sake, and she said fuck all. She just left one day and then I never saw her. I reported her missing. I've done all the right things." "Was she going to keep the baby, Rob?" says Josie. The door opens, and a woman in velour bottoms and a grey bra appears behind Hutchison. "What baby?" "Fuck off," says Hutchison. He turns round and snarls in the woman's face. "Just fuck off, go on." He steps back into the flat and says to Staffe, "I said I'd marry her. I would tomorrow." In the light of the flat, Josie can see he is a handsome man with fine features and expensively cut mod hair. He's skinny-rib, and his jeans are crazily low, showing tufts of hair, the hollow indent of his loins. His latest girl looks him up and down as she brushes past, the top of her velour trackie under her arm. They go inside and sit down, and Hutchison runs through the last days he spent with Emily May Bagshot. He swears blind he hasn't seen her since the 15th of July 2008, and he doesn't know she'd ever signed up to not follow through with the birth. Josie asks him about the 2 visits Emily had made to the City Royal's antenatal unit, as verified by his own statement in the missing persons file. I'd have gone, like a shot, but she never wanted me to. Was she looking forward to the birth? Mostly. Hutchison stands, goes into a cupboard and pulls out a framed photograph. That's her. Something else, eh? Josie takes the photograph. A beautiful girl with almond eyes and a shock of honey-coloured ringlet hair, smiling the broadest smile straight into camera. She was going to get rid, wasn't she, Rob? He shrugs. She was messed up. She was cool and then she wasn't. Don't get me wrong, I loved her. But she'd have been fuck all use as a mother. I'd have brought the baby up, I told her that. I love kids. More than the mother, says Staffe. What do you mean? Hutchison looks up, stares Staffe in the eye. Hey, not like that. I'd never have forced her. Fuck me, not like that poor cow they found the other week. He sits down. He talks to the floor. Jesus, it's not one of them. Can't be, not Emily. Tell me about her appointments at the hospital. She went to City Royal, says Staffe. I didn't go. His voice cracks as the ends of his words fail. The first time. She liked it, I remember. She came home and she was buzzing. It was a good day for her. She didn't always have good days. You think she's all right, don't you? What did Emily say about the hospital? She said the nurse was nice to her. Hutchison wrings his hands, frowns, searching for the memory. She sat there. He turns to Josie. Where you are now. She'd been worried about going, said she felt ashamed. So she was going to end it. Like I said, she couldn't make her mind up. But this nurse made her feel like what she was doing would be all right. Did she say anything else about the nurse? Said she was pretty. Hutchison smiles to himself, lost in a good thought. She always said when she thought a girl was pretty. She was like that. And she knew her. Knew her? What was her name? Hutchison shrugs. They weren't mates or nothing. Try to remember. I can remember exactly. Emily said, I'm sure I know her. I asked her where from and she said she didn't want to talk about it. She was dog-tired, simple as. Staffe stands, whispers something to Josie and goes into the hallway. What's she doing? Says Hutchison. I have to make a call. Oh, my God, says Hutchison. He leans forward and his shoulders twitch. You think they took her? You think she's down there? I don't know, Rob, says Staffe. DC Chancellor's going to ask you some questions about Emily. We'll do whatever we can to find her. Staffe steps out, calls Jumbo, who says he'll get hold of forensics, and Staffe gives him Asquith's number, tells him to get the underground historian down there pronto. And then he asks Jumbo to get hold of Pulford. He says, tell him to check the nurse's rota for the days and shifts when Bagshot had her appointments. Tell him to look for a nurse Delahunty. Eve Delahunty. Pulford sits in a steel-framed chair and feels the knots in his lower back tighten. It is well past midnight, and there are only a couple of nurses here. The duty sister quite literally groaned when he said he needed to see the files of a patient going back 3 years. But she had gone off, wearily, checking in on beds along the ward as she went. He watches her come back, pausing by a bed with a blonde, smiling nurse he recognises from when baby Grace was in her pod struggling for life. As she approaches him, the sister shakes her head. No record of her being here. Are you sure she didn't transfer to another clinic? They often do. This is such a big place. Not everybody's cup of tea. She manages a smile, but soon remembers who she is. Pulford refers to his notes. Emily Bagshot. She came here on the 6th of June and again on the 15th of July, 2008. That's odd. We went computerised way before then, and there's nothing on file. She must have transferred to another clinic. There's no birth registered. That's sad. But it happens all the time, says the sister. There's no need to tell her about Emily going missing. Instead, he says, I'd like to know who was on duty the afternoon of the 15th of July 2008. Can you show me the rosters? Why? The sister looks at him warily. We'll need to talk to the staff, see if their memory is better than the computer. Which makes the sister smile. You know, we have 3,500 births a year here. I'll get the roster up, but then you'll have to come back when we have more cover if you want to talk to the nurses. That's if they're still here. As they go, the blonde nurse smiles at Pulford. Her teeth are good and her eyes sparkle. She closes one of them slowly and makes Pulford laugh. As he goes, he half turns, catches her looking him up and down. It brightens his night. In the sister's office, the overhead lights fizz and the computer screen glows. Her office faces onto the Victorian bricks of Raven Lane. It is a skyless aspect, and he wonders how long the staff might go without seeing natural light. Duty sister was Underwood. She's gone. Nurses Redpath and Gilligan are gone too. She clicks onto another screen. But Stafford's still here. She's on tonight, actually. Is she blonde? I can't spare her. Like I said, you'll have to come back. Oh, and there's Nurse Delahunty too. That's it. Eve Delahunty? Yes. How'd you know her? From the Baby Grace case. Ah, yes. She got attached to that one. The sister shakes her head, suddenly looking stern. I'll show you out. Staffe takes his final step down the ladders into the Smithfield tunnel. Unlike the last time he was here, the tunnel is ferociously lit, revealing a cavern that had been intended as a passenger hall. Within 50 yards or so, the cavern forks into two separate conduits. Staffe stands at the confluence of the two tunnels, walks backward towards the entrance, looking left and right. The entrance curves round towards the bottom of the ladders, and you can barely see into the left-hand tunnel. Kerry was found in the right. From the left, emerging from their blind spot, a group of SOC officers in white disposable overalls march into view. The gang on the right are following the historian Asquith. As soon as he sees Staffe, Asquith tacks an extra clip to his stride, holds his hand aloft, as if this is his world, Staffe merely a guest. Staffe looks beyond Asquith into the brilliantly lit, carved tubes going nowhere. The Victorians had cut into London's clay these perfect cylinders, except at the bottom, where they had carved shells for the two platforms, and below that, troughs to take the rails. Except you can see now that they're not perfect, on account of what Asquith had called quaternary river terrace deposits. This is the sand and gravel from the course of the Thames, and it rendered this tunnel unstable. Elsewhere, in this part of the network, they would cut and cover. Kerry Degg had been at the end of the right-hand platform, and the detritus from the berth had been recovered further along, up what Asquith called a service spur. Now, in this light, it seems perfectly plausible, and not quite so inhumane, to be tendered down here. But Staffe reminds himself of that first scene he discovered, when Kerry had bitten almost clean through her lip. And he begins to wonder where the hell they might have put Emily Bagshot. Asquith says, "I've taken them every navigable yard of the system, and there is nothing."
Are you sure? What about the spurs where we found the placenta?
"Am I sure?" says Asquith, pulling his beard.
He looks at Staffe quite nonplussed.
"Am I sure? Do you have any idea how much research I have conducted since our last trip? I have spoken with the London Transport in-house historian. I have consulted with engineers at Imperial College. I have cross-checked the mappings of the water, gas and electric companies, and the cable communications cartographers."
His eyes sparkle, and his lips are wet with his passion for this subterranea. Above, the tunnel roof glistens with percolating moisture.
"I know this place. I know this place like nobody else alive."
A strange phrase, thinks Staffe. Asquith takes a step closer. Behind him, the Soccos are packing away. A light shuts down, and the electric fizz goes down a notch. Kerry's tunnel goes back to black. Staffe feels a chill jag through his blood. Asquith whispers passionately, up close now so Staffe gets a gust of the bearded man's supper.
"Is there another woman? Were we looking for a body?"
"Mind your own damn business."
"You invited me to make this my business. I'm a part of this."
"What made you come down here the night we found Kerry Degg?"
"I found her."
"What exactly made you come?"
"I had planned the visit for months."
"You had no permissions. What if you had discovered something of value? That would be theft as well as trespass."
"You're not proposing to betray me, Inspector?"
"Answer me. Why that night?" Asquith looks away. "You'd seen somebody coming down here, hadn't you?"
"No."
"Was it a man?"
"I've told you."
"How about a nurse?"
He shakes his head.
"Which tunnel did you go down?"
Asquith turns, says, "They left."
To his back, Staffe asks Asquith, "And did you hear anything at all?" Asquith doesn't move, nor does he say anything. Staffe taps him on the shoulder. Asquith spins round, smiling and tapping his ear.
"Sorry, a little hard of hearing."
"You saw nothing down here?" Asquith shakes his head. "You wouldn't want to obstruct the truth. You're an historian, for crying out loud." Which makes Asquith smile.
"I have nothing to be ashamed of. And as for obstruction, my actions have been quite the reverse."
He holds his head high and walks away, towards the constable at the bottom of the ladder. As he gets to the uniformed officer, he has to pause, waiting for somebody else descending the ladder. "Don't talk to him!" shouts Staffe. Asquith and Nick Absalom stand just feet apart. Each of them looks bemused, and as Asquith climbs, Absalom approaches Staffe, wide-eyed, like a child in the grotto of all grottos. He looks around in wonder, says, "How could this be here, and nobody know?" "I've done my bit, Absalom," says Staffe. "Now, you tell me what you know." "We have our deal. Can I take photographs?" "No." "Who was that I just passed? He looked weird, but not a suspect, right?" "You're here. Nobody else." Staffe is uneasy about this pact he has made with the Devil's Own, but he has a pro quo in mind, so extends his arm with a sweep and points the way to the tunnels. "You can have a look round. I'll even show you the spot we found Kerry Degg. Now, what is it you said you could tell me?"
Absalom says, "I've had contact from Leslie Crawford." "I knew it," says Staffe. "She's been in touch when we were at the Sean Degg scene. And since. She saved another baby in 2008. The mother and baby survived." "My God," says Staffe. "How do you know she's not bullshitting just to get this bill of Vernon Short's resurrected?" "The mother is Emily Bagshot." Staffe stares into the deep-set dark eyes of Nick Absalom. "I need to know how you know this." "Am I in?" Staffe nods. Absalom produces a piece of paper from the top pocket of his suit jacket, hands it to Staffe, who reads it in silence. "It checks out." "What was the postmark?" "It was hand-delivered." "You have CCTV?" "A motorcycle courier delivered it. We tracked him down, but he said he was paid in cash to deliver it by another courier." "Did he know him?" Absalom grins. "No, and he kept his helmet on. You've got to hand it to her." "Have you run a story yet?" "Are you kidding? Vernon Short's bill is making a comeback. I had to run something." "Did you mention Bagshot?" Absalom shakes his head, which tells Staffe that Absalom needs more. He will drip-feed what Crawford has told him over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, hoping that the story develops, that he can garner further details. "You scratch my back, Absalom, and I'll give you more." "Like what?" "Tomorrow, you'll be planning to name Emily Bagshot, right?" "Maybe." "Well, that's fine. You'd like a picture of the baby, though, wouldn't you?" "Too bloody right. Do you have one?" "Oh, yes. So tomorrow, you tell your readers about Emily and her baby." "Baby Bagshot." "Well, is that what you're calling her?" "Her? I didn't say it was a girl. The note doesn't mention it's a girl. You know it's a girl?" "I'm damn certain." "You should tell your readers that you're about to acquire a picture. You should include that in your next copy, as soon as you can." "What's in this for you?" It is Staffe's turn to grin. He slaps Absalom on the shoulder and says, "Come with me. We don't have to need opposite things, Nick, not always. Sometimes what's good for you can be good for me. Vice versa." "Vice bastard versa," says Absalom. "Now, where did you find Kerry Degg exactly? I can have a photograph, can't I? Just the one?" "Later. First, let's see what you're made of." "30. Tommy brings the suitcase downstairs, sets it by the front door and calls, "Sabine! It's time!" In the lounge, he pulls a drawer all the way from its housing in the Dutch dresser, and he empties the contents, turns the drawer upside down, and pulls away a taped passport inside a plastic bag. Tommy removes the secreted identity from the bag, trousers it, and puts the drawer back, loads it. "Do I really have to go, chérie?" says Sabine. Giselle is by her side. "I want Mama," says Giselle. "We'll have a special time," says Tommy, sinking to his knees and hugging his little girl. He whispers, "Go to your room, ma petite singe." He tickles her under her chin, and she giggles freely. In her eyes you can see she's already forgotten that she was upset. Giselle nods and skips out of the room. Sabine sobs. Tommy sits on the edge of the sofa and pulls her towards him. He listens to Giselle playing upstairs and runs his hands up his wife's legs, all the way, under her loose-fitting Karen Millen dress. He bought it for her. She swears blind it is her favourite. He rests his head on her lump and says, "We've wished it so. We've wished it so long, chérie. Be strong. For Giselle and for me, be strong." She puts her hands on his face and he looks up into her eyes. He loves her so much, and with his hands busy inside her clothes, he unclasped the hooks from the eyes on the rigmarole beneath her fine dress. Sometimes people stop Sabine in the high street and say they don't know how she does it, to look the way she does when she's so pregnant, so elegant. To which Sabine smiles coyly, almost embarrassed. Tommy continues to fumble, but he gets there in the end. With a final release and a gentle tug, he relieves Sabine of this sham burden. He pulls the lump down, and she runs her hands over her flat stomach and sighs. They each look down at the bump that Tommy has placed on the floor. His tailor had run it up, had expanded it once each month for the last 5 months to get her showing and to keep it that way. Tommy hands Sabine her passport, equally false. He says, "When you come back, Giselle will have a baby brother." "Your blood," she says, her eyes flitting as if there is so much to be wary of. "How is he?" "He's in good hands, as healthy as you like." "I wish I could see him." She runs her hands in Tommy's hair. She does it roughly. He's such a big man. She can be rough as she likes and he doesn't feel it. But that's only half the truth. "We need to talk about him, Tommy. He'll never be whole, not without his sister."
"He'll have the perfect life, just you see."
"But I can't see."
"Soon. They'll be together. We'll all be together. It's a natural law. This is meant to be."
He holds her by the hips. She grabs his hair tighter and stoops down, kisses him on the mouth. In the heart of the kiss, he says,
"Did I ever let you down?"
"No, never." Tommy thinks, how, on God's earth, will he be able to accomplish this beautiful thing from the monster he has created? "Why do we need to see him?" says Pulford. Staffe raps the window again and recognises the tattooed man who walks slowly, squatly to the entrance of the rendezvous. "We need to know everything we possibly can about Kerry's state of mind, how she was behaving in those last days before she disappeared. I've a feeling those who loved her most turned against her." "Who were you talking about?" "Bridget and Sean." "And others. She had an uncle." Pulford clocks the door opening over Staffe's shoulder. He points, and as Staffe turns, to see Philip Ramone waiting as the minder unlocks the door, he whispers, "Tommy." The door opens. "We'll go out. Have some tea," says Ramone. "What's wrong with your office?" asks Pulford. "Don't want us coming in a third time, eh, Philip? Do you really think you're being watched?" "What if I just want some air?" "It's a free country," says Staffe, following Ramone through the alley that leads up to Berwick Street Market, where vendors shout and vans rev their engines, pop their horns, trying to squeeze between stalls. Ramone weaves through the crowds, his silver bouffant head raised high. Every few steps he nods at stallholders and punters alike, until just before the blue posts on the corner of Broadwick Street, where he goes through a door to an unmarked shop. Inside, the lighting is low and the air thick with smoke. In the far corner is a tiny counter with a giant urn. All along one wall, men sit in fours, playing cards and smoking and drinking tea. An aroma of whiskey swirls in the smoke. "They're smoking," says Pulford. "It's someone's home," says Ramone. "They're allowed." They sit in the window and watch the busiest of life chug on by. Their tea is brought, already sugared, in thick china mugs. It reminds Staffe of being very young in a Lyons tea shop. His grandfather would take him, and he would scoop Knickerbocker glory from a tall ridged glass with a long-handled silver spoon. His grandfather would tip whiskey into his tea and smoke the whole time. Ladies would pinch young William's cheek and pat down his parting, and whisper to his grandfather. He tries to remember what his parents were doing, for him to be out with his grandfather. "Tell me about Tommy, Mr. Ramone, and all about Kerry, too, in those last days." "You're a dog with a bone. You want to kill a dog, you can give it a bone, one you've treated." "Was she going off the rails?" Ramone takes a sip of his tea. "This is good." "Her family turned on her." "Oh, you reckon she had a family, Inspector?" "My guess is Tommy helped to get that residency with you, but that was before he knew she was pregnant." "Why would Tommy stick his neck out for a girl like Kerry?" "Don't shit me, Philip, you know. I know you know." Staffe gives Pulford a nod. "Even I know," says Pulford. "What do you know?" "That Tommy Given is Kerry's uncle." "Was," says Ramone. He puts out a cigarette, sips his tea, and lights another. "I'm very fond of Tommy. He's a better man than anyone gives him credit for, and I don't believe it's a crime to help out your flesh and blood." "What did he do when he found out she was pregnant?" "He told me to pull the residency. Said it wasn't right. Tommy knows right from wrong, all right." "And did you?" "We'd signed the contract. It was a tidy sum. I tried, but—" Ramone shakes his head, takes in a lungful and a half, coughs up like an engine that can't catch the light. "She laughed when I said to hand the contract back. She had a nasty laugh, like a knife. You can tell a lot about a person by their laugh. You can tell if they're weak or cocky, or if they don't love themselves as much as they ought. And you can tell if they don't know what life's worth. But if you're asking me if Tommy would harm a hair of that girl—" He looks at Staffe, then back at Pulford, shaking his head, coughing again, and getting it to catch this time. "It's a sad, sad world, but it's not that sad, I hope to God." "Did Tommy come round when he knew she was having twins?" "Twins? I know, Philip. He wanted the best for her, is all I know." Philip drags heavily on his cigarette and tips a glug of whiskey into his tea. He drinks it down and looks out at his corner of London, clinging to a better past. "This is some town, hey?" "Did you ever meet Kerry's sister?" He shakes his head. "Nor hair nor hide of her. Knowing what I do of Kerry, I'm amazed they didn't break the mould." Staffe regards his own finger, a millimetre from the protruding plastic that is the bell. He also regards all the things he knows that he didn't know the last time he was here, stood outside the mansion block on the castle now, a kidney stone's throw from the wrought Hammersmith Bridge. If he presses the bell, she will come to him, and the words will begin to spill. He could let someone else do it. Would it be such a cowardly route to take? Staffe pulls his hand away. There had to be a nurse down there, in the tunnel. Someone who knew how to usher new life into the world, and now a baby is missing. There is powdered milk inside this place. If he closes his eyes, which he does, he can see her in the half-light. At the height of their love-making she had stopped, for an instant, and looked him dead in the eye, said, "I could." He had said, "What? Could what?" And she had said, "I don't. Not yet. But I could." It could be love, he'd thought. And then she had pulled him close to her, deeper inside her. Her skin was soft to the touch, but hard to the press. She tasted of nothing whatsoever, but afterwards he could run his tongue around his mouth and find her again, like the smoke in your sweater after a bonfire. He steps back, looks up and hopes that she is not in. He takes out his phone to call her, but sees he has a missed call from Jasmine Cash. It seems as if it might have been a week or a month since he last met with Jasmine. He knows it will not be a good thing, but he makes the call. "I'm worried about Jados," says Jasmine without a hello or how are you. "He's still holding that job down, isn't he?" "It's what I'm worried about." The line peters to silence, and Staffe looks up to see if Eve's curtains twitch, but there is no sign of life. "Go on," he says. "There's something you have to tell me." "I can't trust you, right? I've called in confidence." "I want Jadis to make it, you know that. Now, is there something you have to tell me?" "I have to tell you. I said I would. I promised." Staffe remembers. Jasmine said the promise, and then said she didn't need to, and now it is her that is broken, not the promise. Behind him, the syrupy grunt of a taxi draws close, and its brakes squeal. Staffe turns. From the taxi, Eve steps out, and when she sees him, she smiles. Her instinct is to be pleased, but she must then see something in his face that makes a frown quickly assert itself. "Staffe?" says Jasmine. "I have to go, Jasmine, but I'll see him. I'll call round. I think something's going down. In fact, something is going down." "Hello," says Eve. "I'll see him tomorrow." "Promise?" "Promise." He hangs up. They kiss. His hand on her hip. He doesn't mean to, but he can feel her underwear beneath. A tiny clog of coal has gathered on that bud of membrane in the corner of her eye. It's called he can't remember. Sylvie had told him what it's called, and now he's forgotten. "This is a pleasant surprise," says Eve. "Pleasant? Maybe we can do better than that." She puts the key to the door. "Is it okay if I come in?" "Why wouldn't it be?" She smiles at him and puts her hand to his face. She seems confident. He follows Eve in and they go up. He waits in the kitchen whilst she changes out of her uniform, can hear the ghost rustle of clothes through her imperfectly closed bedroom door, then the drawer and clasp of furniture. The shower runs. He mooches around the flat. Everything looks normal, sustainable. It is painfully easy for him to imagine being a part of the domestic here. He can picture himself kicking off sheets, preparing them both a fast breakfast, reading her mood. He reaches for the cupboard, opens it. The powdered milk is gone. He rummages to the back, tries another cupboard, then another, looking over his shoulder. He looks under the sink, but there is not so much as a grain of SMA. He hears the gurgle of plumbing and tiptoes through the lounge and into the bedroom. A child was here, he is sure. Yet now his assumption seems quite preposterous. She has laid out bra and pants and thick tights on the bed, a white lambswool crew top and a short kilt. And he can see she will look just so inside it. On hands and knees, he looks under the bed, then hears the shower stop. His knees click as he stands, retreats, closing the door to its precise degree, and forming sentences of what he might say to her. As he waits, sitting on her sofa, he can't shake the clarity from his head. "What's troubling you?" She bends to kiss his cheek, and her dressing gown falls open. She grabs it, quite coy, and takes a step back. He looks at the slim rise of her legs, but quickly averts. He knows he is about to forfeit that. What's wrong, Staffe? Something's wrong.
The powdered milk is gone.
What powdered? She moves away. You've been looking. The last time you were here.
Why was it here? And now it's gone?
You're a bastard.
I'm not. Tell me why.
You don't have the right.
Rights have been removed. There's no such thing when people are murdered. A baby's life is at risk here.
What baby?
Tell me about the milk, Eve.
You're in a world of your own. What use is it, whatever I say?
She smiles, weak and trembling.
You're wrong.
You had Sean Degg's number.
I felt sorry for him. It's a normal emotion. I don't know how this happened to me. How did I get here? He takes a step towards her, reaches out, and she lets him rest his hand on her shoulder.
We should get you a lawyer.
I don't understand.
She looks at him with half-closed, weary eyes.
31.
Well, this is a first, says Pennington. Bringing your girlfriend in for questioning? She's not exactly my girlfriend, and we need to check where she was when Kerry Degg's babies were delivered. Just how long have you thought they were twins? The paperwork at the hospital is non-existent, so we can't be sure. Hence, you think your nurse was involved?
Not my nurse.
If you're right, we need to find this other baby. Do you think your girlfriend,
Miss Delahunty, I found powdered milk in her house and then she hid it.
When was this?
The other day. We're getting closer. Bridget Lamb and Tommy Given are part of the same church. Well, not a church as such. It's called the House of the Holy Innocents.
Christ.
And Leslie Crawford is in the group too. I'm sure Given must know Crawford. If anyone knows where she is, I think it might be him.
You want to rock the boat?
Are my hands untied?
Pennington nods, reaching for the phone. Will you bring him in?
No, I want him to take me to Crawford.
Can't we take the simple option for once?
And risk not finding Zoe Bright?
I wouldn't want that on your conscience, says Staffe. Tommy Given travels light and throws the hold-all into the back of the Merc. For her part, Giselle is much more the seasoned traveller. She toddles across the gravel, tugging her small suitcase on wheels behind her. It keeps getting snagged and toppling over. The case is bright pink and the size of one volume of the OED. It is adorned with the image of Sleeping Beauty, and Tommy comes across, scoops her up in one arm, and lifts the case with 2 fingers of a giant hand. Smet says, "You get it?" Pulford squints into the eyepiece of the camera and squeezes, like a trigger. And the motor drive kicks in louder than he thought, the shutter capturing 4 images per second through its 300mm lens.
"Let's go," he says, "before he sees."
"That's it."
"Staffe said not to follow him," says Pulford, walking up the lane, getting into the car. He is tempted to see where Given goes, to see if he might lead them to Kerry and Sean's orphan twin, Grace's sibling, should there be such a person. He hasn't the guts to interview me himself. Josie weighs Eve up, seeing how she would appeal to Staffe. It is the first time she's seen Eve in civvies, and she isn't what Josie had expected. She's wearing a print top that Josie had admired in whistles but couldn't afford, and a pair of wide-flared jersey slacks. Heels that would send her immediately overdrawn. Inspector Wagstaff is out of the city. We're a team. Eve looks Josie up and down, smiles faintly. I feel an idiot. Tell me what drew you to Grace. I remember you calling in a lot when she was in intensive care. But you were there too. The sooner you account for everything, the sooner you can go. Everything? What exactly is it that you're saying I have to account for? You had powdered milk in your apartment. So? Why would you have such a thing? Is it a crime? You can't verify where you were when Kerry Degg gave birth, and we have reason to believe a nurse was with her. A nurse wouldn't abandon a woman like that. If you thought she was doing wrong by putting herself before the baby, you think I'm one of them? Jesus! Would you abandon a woman like that? Could you? Listen, I found Grace. I'm not sure what would have happened if I hadn't. That's why I stayed with her. And now I know she's going to be fine, I have to find out who left her there. Whoever did it would feel guilty. It would haunt them. Eve presses her fingers to her cheeks and sighs. She avoids Josie's eye. Especially if there is another baby. Another? Twins, Eve. A child is missing and the mother was left to die. At least Grace was delivered to us, but it all went wrong down there. Were there complications? I really don't know what you're talking about. We have a warrant. As we speak, we're going through your place with a fine-tooth comb. You can't do that. Did you think it would help, attaching yourself to Inspector Wagstaff the way you did? He made the first move. I'm the one who was dragged in. Ask him. You have Sean Degg's number in your handbag. He snooped on me. Staffe. He looked in my bag. Why would you have his number? We were with Grace together. We said if she made it, we'd celebrate. I felt sorry for him. The whites of Eve's eyes are pink, and she blinks fast as she fleetingly looks at Josie. What makes you so sure a nurse will be involved? Childbirth is the most natural thing in the world. Hundreds, thousands of babies are born every day under a mother's own steam. Not underground, and finding their way out of a tunnel and into our car park. And there's something else, Eve. There was another one, at least one, 3 years ago. Leslie Crawford took another woman. We know. Eve seems lost in thought, as if trying to recall something. Her face is grey-white. Jadis Golding waits for Jasmine Cash to leave their flat on the Limekiln estate. She has Millie in a papoose, facing outwards. Jadis knows that Jasmine prefers to have Millie facing towards her, likes to cup her bottom and hug the baby close into her bosom, whispering to her. But Jasmine says it is better for the baby to look out, to be fed the world. The instant the door closes, Jadis puts the snick up and shoots the bolt. Then he watches until Jasmine and his daughter cross the tenemented Limekiln enclave, fading onto the city road. He goes to the baby's bedroom and sinks to his knees in front of the wardrobe. He took art classes when he was in Belmarsh, and when he got out, had painted a frieze of dolphins around the bottom of the wardrobe. He removes the boxes of toys and slips the hook from its eye at the base, lifting up a false bottom and reaching right to the back, pulling out his Browning 49. He doesn't want to use it, or even carry it. He still finds it an ugly weapon. He'd rather have to carry a Glock. He can't help it, but a Glock makes him feel good about himself. Jadis checks the clip, puts the pistol down the back of his jeans. There's no safety on the Browning, but the trigger pulls the best part of 10 pounds, heavy enough to be safe. Today, because he is carrying, he wears a belt and has his jeans hoisted a few inches higher than normal. He pulls on his Sean John jacket, suitably long, and then makes the text to Carlyle. Within a minute, Jadis has the response he requires. The poor bastard Carlyle is shitting himself. He makes his way across the lime kiln quadrangle, reminding himself how good his E-gang had been whilst he was inside. Jasmine has her X5 still. Baby Millie wears only Mona Lisa, and a Grandma Rose was flown over from Trinidad for the christening. And now he has to reinvest, as if he had a choice. Jadis has to chip in. They had given him this gun whose steel he can feel in the crack of his arse, had been pressed hard into his jaw just 3 days ago when he had said he wanted out. When he had placed 1 foot outside the circle, they had treated him like the enemy, and now that treatment is going down the line towards Dan Carlyle. Dan is 36, and is waiting for Jadis in the disused underground car park round the back of Peerless Street, where they're knocking down an old block. Dan is smoking. Jadis didn't know he smoked, but there's plenty he doesn't know about Dan, who is a director of De Vere Chance, the firm that saved Jadis's ass by giving him a job in the post room. What Jadis does know about Dan is that he has a beautiful wife who doesn't need to work, and 3 beautiful children, one of whom, Luke, has cerebral palsy. Dan loves Luke the most, which makes Dan sad. Lately, many things have been making him sad, and to comfort him, Dan has a friend called Heroin. "You got it," says Jadis. Dan is standing by a pillar in the middle of the car park. Above, the ground shudders with the demolition work going on next door. He nods and produces an oversized checkbook from a Waterstones bag. Jadis takes it and flicks through. "Shit, man. They say these are good for 50 grand each. I'll get it back the day after tomorrow." "No. I need it back tomorrow. Before 4 o'clock, it's what you said." Jadis reaches behind him. He takes a step towards Dan, pulls out his Browning, and kicks out at Dan's midriff at the same time. Since he was 4, Jadis has done karate. It's the one thing he has to show from having had a father. He pins Dan to the pillar and aims the .49. He can feel his pulse change its beat, and his blood courses fast. He has a good feeling, which he knows will pass, but he puts the gun to Dan's left temple. He turns it 10 degrees to his right and makes the almighty squeeze. It's the most power a man can exert, and the sound is fat and sharp, and Dan Carlyle screams. He closes his eyes tight shut, then opens them, waits for the life to pour out of him and onto the car park floor. He is trembling, and Jadis watches his ear, waits for it to bleed, and it does. A thin, viscous stream emerges from the folds of hard membrane. Jadis reaches out to Dan, grabs his tenderest hair above the ear, and when Dan can't help but scream, he pushes the hot, cordite-reeking barrel of the gun into Dan's mouth. Says, "Day after tomorrow, right?" Dan closes his eyes, slow, to nod, yes. "You got the authorized signatures, too?" Dan closes and opens his eyes again. Jadis removes the gun and wipes it against the shoulder of Dan's jacket to remove the spittle on the barrel. "You meet me here day after tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Then you can have your book back." What Dan will receive is an extremely competent forgery of the book, down to the feint and the watermark and the serial numbers. Drafts aren't used so much these days, and this book is the next but one in line. The plan is no one will notice until the original drafts are presented for payment, which they will be. They'll all land the same day, and that night, at close of business, the books won't balance. Dan will have to make up his own story, but he's senior enough to survive. He'll have to come up with some whipping boy. Soon, Jadis will deliver the banker's drafts, so many licenses to print money, provided you get them precisely right. But he feels low. feels all the hope for a different life making its way to the ground beneath, sticking between his toes like sharp sand. He leaves it behind with each step as he goes. Out on City Road, he smokes a joint, and by the time he gets to Shoreditch for the drop, he feels less bad. He is dulled, but the ghost is there. He felt this way after what he did to the postmaster, but can't see himself doing any more time. He can't go back in there and pretend, every minute of each day, that he can fly his bird like a true soldier. Truth is, Jadis doesn't feel like a soldier anymore. Outside the back of Cuts, he finishes the joint. He knocks on the door, and when they open it, he can smell the oil of Dax wax. It's a whiff of the Caribbean, a blast from when his dad took him to have his hair cut, to when he used to walk back to his mother feeling brand new, his short and neat, making him feel $1 million. Staffe watches Jadis disappear through the gate that leads to the back door of the barber's shop. As soon as he had seen the restraint to Jadis's low-slung, backward-sloping gait, as soon as he saw the jeans a little high, he had suspected something was awry. Earlier, he had watched Jadis light up his spliff, and he had waited to see what else emerged from the underground car park. An expensively suited man transpired, every vestige of colour gone from his face, and holding a bloodied handkerchief to his ear. He knows that he has to get to the bottom of whatever Jadis plans to do with that poor man in the expensive suit. Staffe contemplates whether to go into Cuts or wait, and he plots the sequence of actions that will enable him to discover who the suited man is. He will start with Finbar Hare. Or will he? He doesn't want to pull the plug on Jadis if there might be something innocent by way of explanation. His phone goes, and he steps away from the gate, walking round the corner. A gaggle of city boys suck on cigs outside the Nelson between the strippers' acts. He can remember when the Nelson was for locals, when the old boys played doms and the young boys played pool, while the girls took their clothes off, standing on a little round table by the ladies. Who can say which is the better world? "Pulford," he says into his phone. "Gibbons on the move, sir." "Shit, already?" "We let him go, like you said." "Oh, God." "You said to, sir." Staffe wonders if he is too sure about Crawford, about where Tommy might go. "It's okay. Does he have the little girl with him?" "Yes. They're packed for an overnight stay by the look of things. Should be easy enough to keep track of, is in the murk." "You got the photograph of her?" "I've emailed it in. They're doing it now." Staffe is outside the front of Cuts. Jadis has his feet up in a barber's chair and looks at himself in the mirror with more than the usual weight. He wants to intervene, to stop this playing out, but the call is from afar and it cannot wait. 32. The two women unclasped from their hug. It had lingered, had involved Leslie whispering assurances that everything will be just fine, that they will have to adapt. It may not be exactly what they had planned, but an impression will be made upon the world for the better. For her part, Zoe Bright says nothing. The baby kicks, and she reaches out for Leslie Crawford's hand, places it on her bump. The baby kicks again, and the women look at each other in dead earnest. This joyous thing makes neither woman smile, and Zoe's recent convictions are reconfirmed afresh. All that matters is this baby. She has to bring it to the world safe. "You said that the police are on to Given," says Zoe. Leslie Crawford looks out of the window, follows the flight of the heron across the marsh. "He'll look after himself. We must do the same." "I was shown a newspaper." "I'm sorry you were kept like this. It had to appear this way. It had to convince, for your sake. It gave you a way out." "Gave me a way out." What did the paper say? Zoe considers what Leslie Crawford might have meant when she said it gave her a way out. Have her plans changed? Well, they mentioned Emily Bagshot, and Vernon's bill too. It seems that the public are with us. It's democracy, the only kind that's left. Leslie Crawford sits on the edge of the threadbare sofa that Zoe had pushed under the window. The sun is slanting in, low, shaved by the Welsh hills. She rests the pads of her fingertips lightly upon her knees, together. There's no such thing in Parliament. Those thieves and liars will do only what lines their pockets or plumes their power. So you have to offer them power. Sometimes the outcome can be democracy. But will the MPs vote for the bill? They'll vote for what the electorate want, and that's in hand. Have the plans changed? We have to adapt. It's the way of things. It can't be good that Given's cut adrift. You know what he's capable of. The heron swoops low. It moves fast, but its wings are slow. He came to us by chance. Chance was never going to be sufficient. Our interests fused, but nothing is forever. He'll kill us. Leslie Crawford looks quite demure as she turns to face Zoe, saying with utter calm, "No, my love. It was me who let the cat out. He'll kill me, if he can." Staffe closes down the image on his phone. The artist's impression of Baby Bagshot, as Absalom insists on calling her, is in pen and ink, and pictures the infant by a 5-bar gate with an idyllic cottage behind. Appearing from the right, the lower arm and hand of a parent, probably her father, rests on her shoulder. The wrist is wrapped in an oversized watch. The likeness, obscured here and there and duly vetted by the solicitors at the News, will send Tommy Given berserk. Staffe can only pray that he and they can cope with the consequences. Jombor has issued alerts to all airports and the ferry terminals, but Staffe reckons they'll draw blank. His money is on Tommy having made a trip north, to either Nottingham or the Wirral. Either way, he'll be in a hurry to catch up with Leslie Crawford, for having made contact with Nick Absalom and the News. Right now, Staffe is unsure quite who is prey. He raps the door. It is dusk, and he has been told that Vernon Short was not in the Commons today, and nor did he visit his club. Perhaps he is busy mulling the final words of his resurrected bill. Not so much resurrected as annulling of its withdrawal. It comes before the House the day after tomorrow. When Vernon opens the door, it is plain to see that the statute book is far from the forefront of his mind, for Vernon is not his dapper self. His hair is ruffled, and his eyes are heavy. His shirt is 3 buttons undone, and the collar is frayed, the sleeves rolled up, and his moleskin trousers are bagged at the knee. He looks as if he might have been gardening, except when he says, "Oh, you." A pall of booze hums forth. He turns his back and pads into his home, along the Minton floor and into the kitchen.
End of Disc 7. Disc 8.
They sit at the table, and Vernon pushes a bottle of Glenlivet in Staffe's direction, then a tumbler. Staffe pours himself a modest one, not wanting it, but neither wanting Vernon to feel as if he has to drink on his own. "Your bill is finally upon us. Like a bloated body in the Thames. I thought you'd be pleased, though I have to say I'm surprised. How does the Home Secretary feel about it?" "After all these years in politics, nothing surprises me any more." He forces a smile and lights up a Rothmans. "Time was we did what was best. Parliament was trusted to govern." "And your pro quo, is that secure?" "You take what you can, but really the forces are irresistible. You can't impose your will on the people anymore. There was a time when we believed in something different from the other side, and you wouldn't give a toss if somebody disagreed with you. In fact, it was a good thing. That was the point of it all. It lit the fire in the belly." "In your father's time?" There was an acceptance that we knew best. It's why we were in the club, and the man in the street was in the street. Now it's a kowtow to the press. Today's dish is my bill, that's all it is. And your place in the cabinet? He shrugs. Your father would be proud. My father. Vernon pours himself another and stubs out the cigarette just 2 drags into it. I don't smoke. I keep them in the house for visitors, remember? He looks at Staffe, trying to weigh him up. I'm older than you, but not that much. When people called on our parents, you'd offer them cigarettes and a gin, and they'd ruffle your hair. It was a different time. But you didn't come to humour me, Inspector. What do you have? Staffe thinks about what Declan Hartson had said about Vernon not having the balls. He thinks how none of what Vernon has done this last month fits. He tries to find a not unpleasant way of saying this, but he can't. He does his best. You don't really care about the bill, do you, Vernon? I mean, you don't care about 20 or 24 or 28 weeks any more than you care about the war or elder care or nailing benefit frauds. And if you did, you'd keep it under a bushel. Vernon lights another cigarette. Go on. I'd like you to tell me exactly why you put yourself behind the bill in the first place. I'm not going to do that. You gave Leslie Crawford what she had to hold against the Home Secretary, didn't you? I would never do that. And anyway, you said she gave it to me. You arranged for the details of Kathy Killick's abortion to fall into her hands because you had no choice. She got a bag with that in it, and we got it the wrong way round. And you got behind the bill because you had no choice. I was going to water the lawn. The sun is down. It's the best time. Vernon finishes his drink and stands up, takes an almighty drag from his cigarette and holds it in. What does she have on you, Vernon? What was in the bag that she gave to you? Nobody has anything on me. Leslie Crawford has a hold on you, and I need to know. This has to stop. She has to stop, and you know it. What do I know? It's out of control, and Leslie Crawford is going to do something. She doesn't care about you, or about Kerry Degg, or Zoe Bright, or Tommy Gibbon anymore. Vernon blinks twice. His Adam's apple rises and falls, and he reaches for the whiskey, pours himself another, and tries to inhale his cigarette without removing it from his lips, but this makes him splutter. He punches his chest twice. You know about the threats that Kathy Killick received? He shrugs, has the decency to look ashamed. The strangest things can suit a cause, especially in my game, Inspector. Sometimes you have to look a little deeper. Crawford will say it's you who spilled the beans on Killick and her abortion all those years ago. She'll ruin you. But if you tell me what she knows about you, I can manage the information. If I have to dig around, everybody's going to know. I will ask whoever it takes, whatever it takes. But I don't want to do that. Honestly, I don't. I swear, on everything that is dear to me, that Leslie Crawford has not one iota of information against me. He looks Staffe in the eye. His eyes are milky. Not a jot. And Staffe believes him. He says, I believe you. Thank you. I'm going into my garden. You can show yourself out. Staffe watches him go, fiddling with the concertina security grill that keeps the unwanted from trespassing. He opens the door to his garden. Who, then? Says Staffe. What? Vernon looks back at him, as if he has gone for his wallet and come up blank. Who does she have the dirt on? I said I'm going to water my lawn. And your father's lawn before you. Vernon turns his back, walks into his garden with his head down, looking older, much older than his years. You were on duty the day Kerry Degg went to City Royal for her final consultation. The records from that consultation have conveniently vaporised. And you refused to provide an adequate explanation for the powdered milk. I told you. A friend came to stay. She left it, and I threw it out. Give me her name. Eve looks stronger now. Her resolve seems stiff, and her breathing and speech are even. She has refused a solicitor, saying innocent people don't need solicitors. Staffe says, it was convenient, us becoming friends. A coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. You seduced me. It didn't feel like that. Eve smiles knowingly. She runs her tongue across her top lip. It looks as if you were abusing your position of authority. Was I always in your frame? Did you fuck me for information, Will? You know I didn't. I know I had nothing to do with the events that preceded the birth of Grace Degg. You sound different. Different from what? If you tell me everything, you could leave here. Even if I'm guilty. Well, you say you're not, and I believe you. Then release me. This isn't about you, Eve, or me. It's about Grace and Kerry and Sean, and it's about Grace's twin sister or brother. How can you be sure of that? And it's about Emily Bagshot. I saw something about that. She visited City Royal 2.5 years ago, and 3 days later her boyfriend reported her missing. The baby's birth was never registered. There was another. And you saw her. You were on duty the day Emily Bagshot went to City Royal to say she wanted to end her pregnancy. And you told Leslie Crawford. Eve's mouth is open, but she says nothing. Her face turns pale and she doesn't blink. Not me, she says. Do you know Tommy Given? She shakes her head, slowly and slightly, as if she fears her head might topple. You're in it deep, Eve. He stands up, pauses by the door and watches her nod. And I didn't seduce you. It suited you to be with me, didn't it? Eve looks Staffe in the eye. As he leaves her, he thinks that perhaps she has something to be ashamed of. Outside, Staffe tells Johnboy to keep her in the interview room and to allow no food or drink in. If she calls, he is to ignore it. The walls are thick and nobody is next door. He goes up to the incident room and sits down alongside Josie. He pulls out the bottom drawer of her desk and rests his feet on it, leans back, blows out his cheeks. Not going so well, says Josie. She's digging her heels in. It must be weird for you having to interview her. Do we have any of Bridget Lamb's photos? I've got her wedding photograph from the Kingston Advertiser. Perfect. I'll talk to Nurse Delahunty again if you want. Josie pulls the image of Bridget Lamb from a file. The bride beams into camera on the happiest day of her life. The arm of her husband around her shoulder, and him looking as if he might have done too well for himself. Let her stew, he says, taking the photograph from Josie. Do you have the rosters from City Royal there? Josie flicks through a different file and hands him a sheet. He says, this is for the day Kerry disappeared. What about the earlier one? From when Emily Bagshot went in? Josie flicks again and hands him another sheet. Staffe looks at one and then the other, then back again. You want copies? No. He hands the papers back and picks up his car keys. Where are you going?
to find out who killed Sean Degg. Staffe parks his Peugeot 406 outside the off-licence on the New North Road. He flicks the key fob, but it has died and the doors don't lock. He should get a new car, but this one suits. Locked or not, nobody's going to steal it. And it's not a car which a police inspector would drive. From here, he can see the payphone that Sean Degg used the night he died. From there, he called a person who used the very same mobile phone just moments later to call the Lambs landline. It occurs to Staffe that the telephone in Bridget's home might be the very one that Malcolm Lamb would have used when they were at school together. Every now and again, Staffe's dad would come back from the Angel and say he had seen Malcolm Lamb. Malcolm's dad, that is. He would ask Will why he was not friends with Malcolm, and when Will shrugged, he patted his son on the shoulder and said, "His father drinks halves of shandy." "Shandy!" He would say it in the manner of a confidence. Staffe takes out the photograph of Malcolm's bride and breathes in through his nose and mouth at the same time, turning to the off-licence and going in. He waits for the manageress, Maisie Dixon, to finish serving a child a pack of 10 Mayfair. He knows it is Maisie Dixon because he phoned ahead. Maisie was on the night Sean Degg came in. He closes the door behind the child and flips the sign to show closed. "Oi!" says Maisie. "I got an alarm. I got a fucking alarm, and fuck all in the till." Staffe says, "I'm D.I. Wagstaff." Maisie squints, as if she's trying to read film credits. "You're no copper." He approaches her, shows his card, and Maisie eyes him up and down. She smiles, says, "I done nothing. I told you on the phone I'd done nothing." "You were working on the 14th, right? In the evening?" "I work every fucking evening. It's shit. My mother is charging me rent to live in my own house. Is there a law against that?" Staffe takes out the photos. He's careful not to mix them up, and he shows her the image of Sean. It is Sean a year or so ago in a Hawaiian shirt at a free concert in Victoria Park. In the background it says, "Sing Haiti, dance Haiti." "Did you serve this man on the evening of the 14th? "What'd he do?" "Did you serve him, Maisie? It's important." "He could come back. Do for me, I'm not saying nothing." "He won't come back, I promise you. He's dead." "You served him, didn't you?" "Dead?" She nods. "Cheap fucking vodka. He started paying me in coins, then changed his mind. I remember him all right. Gave me the creeps. How'd he die?" "And this person?" Staffe takes the photo of Bridget on the happiest day of her life. He folds it to focus Maisie's attention. Maisie squints again. She shrugs, and then her face screws up like a flower, her nose the centre. "Ah, right. That's it." She nods up at the top shelf, where there are 3 glass sweet jars. They're misted up, and the labels are scratched away at the corners. Humbugs on the left, and sherbet lemons on the right. In the middle, a jar half full of tubes of Parma violets. "Parma violets," says Staffe. "How'd you know?" "I'm a copper, aren't I?" He smiles. Maisie smiles back, quite radiant. "You've been a great help, Maisie." He hands her a tenner. "Treat your mum to a fish supper tonight. And cut her some slack. And try not to serve fags to the children, hey? It'll kill them in the long run." 33. I know who the friend is. The one who came to stay with you, the one with the powdered milk. "You can't hold me here indefinitely," says Eve. Staffe says, "I have to go away soon. They won't release you without my say-so. I could be gone a few days." "I want a solicitor." "You were offered one."
Staffe feels relaxed. He thinks he might see how everything makes sense. What he's been working with throughout this case are many separate pockets of nonsense. People's lives don't make sense. The things we do are difficult to fathom. We act illogically. Put the nonsenses together, and the sense rises to the surface, like subjecting silver nitrate to light and then immersing it in chemicals. It tells the story of what happened at a moment in time, a marriage, a death, a birth. And the more he feels relaxed, the more unease he can detect in Eve. She says, "What are you smiling about?"
"Look at this."
He takes out a piece of paper. He is deliberate, wants his hand to be neat. He writes 2 dates, side by side. Beneath each date he writes 2 names. The names are the same. He turns the paper around so Eve can read it. He rests his pen above the 2nd date, the 6th of January 2011.
"You know this date?"
Eve nods. "When Kerry disappeared. You keep asking me about it."
"And the other?"
She shakes her head.
"Just another date. Why would you remember it?
And I don't need to ask you about the names, do I?" Eve shakes her head. She looks disconsolate. "Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford. Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford." I can read. "Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford. Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford." Stop it! "Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford. Nurse Eve Delahunty, Nurse Natalie Stafford." Will! Please! Eve can't look at him, and she wraps her arms across her chest. Her shoulders tremor. "2 nurses in London. They each came down from a village in Yorkshire." Stop! I asked you to stop. You can't separate them. So much so that they were the only 2 nurses who were on duty on both the night that Emily Bagshot was abducted and the night Kerry Degg was abducted. I don't know anything about an Emily Bagshot. That's bad luck. Do you think we take heed of bad luck in this business? You're going down for this, Eve. It's conspiracy. It's withholding evidence. It's obstructing the course of justice. It's almost as bad as if you'd been the one who took them. And you looked after Grace's twin, didn't you? You fed it. I'm a damn nurse, Will. What could I do? You could have saved Kerry Degg's life. Sean needn't have died, and God knows what the hell happened to Emily Bagshot. Eve looks up at Staffe. Her mascara is melting down her cheeks, and she bites down on her bottom lip. It's a boy. Grace has a brother. You know where he is? She shakes her head. Where is Natalie? We sent cars around to her house and the hospital. She's not there. You could text her, arrange to meet her. We could make things easy for you. You could save Zoe Bright. You keep talking about a woman called Bright. I don't know her. What about Emily Bagshot? She shakes her head without looking at him. I'd only be guessing. You shouldn't have to serve time, Eve. Your instincts were good. To protect a friend, to save a baby, 2 babies. We could keep you from going to prison. I'm scared. Eve is trembling now. Would you hold me, Will? Staffe says, "Interview ends," and flicks off the recorder. Fumbles in his pocket and finds a stick of Wrigley's. He sucks on it and presses it into the spy hole on the door of the interview room, and he goes across to Eve. He sinks to his knees and wraps his arms around her. Despite everything she's been through, she smells of barely anything at all. He whispers, "Tell me about Natalie. What happened to her?" "I told her. You can't bury the truth." "Tell me." Eve talks against his neck. Her breath is warm. She presses her ear against his tight, and she thinks that maybe she might have liked him a little, that perhaps she was not using him entirely. He banishes this, listens as her softly spoken story drums lightly in his head. "We were only 14. We go into town the first Saturday of every month, just me and Nat. My dad would give me a £5 and so would my mum. Nat only had a dad. Her mum ran off. She only ever had a £5, but we'd share my mum's £5. But this one time we got on the bus and the driver said to Nat, 'You again?' I said, 'What do you mean?' And he said, 'She's always off into town.' And Nat pulled me down the bus and shouted at him to watch his tongue. The customers had privacy rights." She said, "Privacy rights." Eve laughed softly at the memory. But that was the end of the line for our Saturdays. As soon as we got to town, Nat said she had to do something and she'd meet me at the station for the 5:10. I knew her dad always waited for her at the stop in Grassington. He'd run me home too, so Nat needed me to be on the bus with her. Her dad loved her enough for two. He's a lovely man." Eve exhales, and it tickles Staffe's neck. "I let her go, but I followed her around town. I almost had to run to keep up, so I knew it was something she was excited about. I knew her better than a sister. And round the back of Vicaries, I got scared for her. She was meeting a boy, but he was a man. He had a sports car, an MR2. He kissed her full on and put his hand on her and she patted it away. They both laughed, and she got in his car. When he got in, he wasn't laughing. He had that look. I could see he was intent. I should have stopped them." "You couldn't," whispers Staffe. "He ruined her. Years later, she told me exactly what he did to her. He had a friend who came along later." "She got pregnant," says Staffe. "I met her at the bus station, and we went home on the bus as if nothing had happened, even though she could hardly walk, and she had a coat tied around her waist to cover the blood. Her lip was cut and her eye was puffed up. She tried to cover it with makeup. Her dad knew the minute he saw her, and he dragged her along to the police. They did nothing." "She can't have children now," says Staffe. "Her solicitor said we shouldn't have got the bus home. He said it as though getting on the bloody bus was the crime." All Staffe can say is, "It wasn't your fault." "Can't you let her be?" Staffe pulls away from Eve and brushes strands of her hair from her cheeks where it tacks to her tears. "Did she tell you how she came to meet Leslie Crawford?" "Can't you see? She's a victim." "The only victim is the victim. It would make a difference if you could tell us Crawford approached her." "Crawford approached her." "Are you just saying that?" "Nat knew Emily Bagshot. Emily's from Otley, right?" "Yes." "Nat and Emily played netball together. Years later, Emily turns up at the Royal saying she wants an abortion. It was me who saw her. If I'd kept my mouth shut. Nat didn't say anything to me, not at that time. Every now and again, last couple of years, Nat goes down to Cornwall. She doesn't tell me, but I worry about her, so I checked in her handbag once when we were out together and she was in the loo and I saw the tickets. She went to Truro. It was an open return. There's a bottle of ginger mead in her cupboard from a cider farm. Lizard cider, it says." "You think Emily Bagshot is living in Truro?" "I don't know. I'm not supposed to know anything. Nat said it was better that way. It would protect me." Eve looks up at him. "I thought you would protect me." "Is that why we were the way we were?" "I'm no different from anyone else. I'm just looking to be loved a little. He wants to be able to say he could, given different circumstances. Instead, he says, if the law can protect you, it will, I promise you that. You tell me everything you know, and I'll have a word with the Crown. The CPS. Will you try calling her again for me? Eve nods and punches in the number to no avail. She shows Staffe the screen. Can you write down all the names and addresses of everyone Natalie knew well enough to take refuge with? Again, she nods, says, I should have known better. Staffe goes to see John, who calls up evidence, gets the herring and Zoe Bright's dissertation brought down, sealed and signed for. Zoe is on all fours, breathing in and out and gasping for air, as if she's just been rescued from the deep. Leslie Crawford kneels beside her, is told time and again, Don't touch me. Just get me a doctor. And time and again Leslie says, I've made a call. Just get an ambulance. A doctor, for God's sake, please. Do it for the baby. Zoe twists, looks up at Leslie Crawford. She snorts when another contraction comes. In reality, as opposed to the story she spun to Dr. Fahey, she is 30 weeks. It's the same time as the last one came, and she fears she will lose this one too. She knows that these circumstances are no chance misfortune. The blame weighs like a stone slab. Call Anthony! She blows her cheeks out. What use is he? I don't know. Zoe blows her cheeks out again and walks backward with her hands so she is kneeling up. Leslie Crawford says, Is it better? Is it getting better? Zoe nods, and Leslie helps her to her feet, supports her as they walk across to the sofa. She eases Zoe down and kisses the top of her head. She kneels between her legs and rubs her hands up and down along Zoe's thighs. Better? Zoe nods. I've made a call and she's coming. Natalie, you're sure she can help me? She's delivered thousands of babies. You won't let me lose it. We can't lose it. We've come too far. I want this baby, says Zoe. She feels the mist rise now, and she breathes deep, feels the baby low on her. It feels almost out of her, as if it is further along than the last one. Dare she hope? She looks down on Leslie Crawford, knows that something is afoot, a change to proceedings. Leslie is always a step ahead, but now she is unsettled, constantly looking at her phone and her watch, and down along the thin track that leads to the Strand. Today it seems far, far away. It is deadly quiet again. The Easter weekend has come and gone, and now there is not a soul in any direction. Zoe says, Will Natalie come alone? Leslie Crawford hesitates. Yes, I'm sure she will. Why wouldn't she come alone? Leslie, please look at me. Crawford turns away from the window. She looks stern. There is the other child, too. The boy. Oh, there is plenty to think about. Is it time? Asked Zoe, putting both her palms on her swollen belly. It can't be far away. You will tell me. I have to prepare, mentally as well as physically. I have the baby to think about. Don't let me lose it, Leslie. Crawford looks hurt. How could I? We need the baby to come. Now it is showing the desire. 34. Pennington wasn't best pleased about releasing Eve Delahunty from custody. It had seemed perverse to him that the very statement which confirmed her as a conspirator was also grounds for releasing her. that she may bait the principal perpetrator. And the thought of the press getting hold of his DI's relationship with the nurse made him shiver. In the end, and despite himself, he was persuaded of the benefits. Staffe watches her come back down the path. They're in Marlow, which is where Nurse Natalie's favourite aunt lives. Eve has been here many times, and Auntie Barbara wasn't remotely surprised to hear from her niece's friend. She wanted me to stay. I couldn't get away, says Eve, sitting in the passenger seat. She smells of marzipan. We had tea. Natalie isn't there? No. You'd tell me if she was? I said I would. Eve looks sad, the realization that her friend is destined for incarceration only just fully dawning. Has Natalie been to see her? She was here yesterday morning. She had the baby with her. Barbara said the baby was called Samuel. She said that Natalie was looking after it for a friend. Eve laughs, nervous. She said she had a suspicion it was mine. Where was she going? Eve shakes her head. And I didn't get the impression Barbara thought anything was wrong. Nat's always been a good liar, but I should know. Staffe calls John Bohr, tells him that they can stop surveilling the hospital and Natalie Stafford's home. There's no chance that she'll turn up, not with the child back in her keeping, but they should step up at the airports and ferry terminals. Where now? Says Eve. It is Staffe's turn to shake his head. Yorkshire? As good a place as any, says Eve. Or Cornwall? Because of what I said about Emily Bagshot. All I know is Nat got the train to Truro a couple of times. How would we know where to look? Yorkshire, Cornwall, they couldn't be further apart. Staffe looks along the high street past the green. North or west? If you'd come clean straight away, we'd have been here in time, says Staffe, unable to help himself. Eve says nothing. Perhaps she still doesn't know if trapping Natalie is a good or a bad thing. Well, she says. Vernon Short's bill is coming up before the House tomorrow. They're going to vote, at last. It seems to have taken forever. He tried to withdraw it, but now the government want it. At least want the vote. So they said the withdrawal was unconstitutional. Which way do you want it to go? Eve shrugs. You can't have that kind of opinion, not in my job. But I wouldn't want it to be driven underground. And 20 weeks, I don't know. How many people change their mind after 20 weeks? You're backing people into a corner. I'm just glad I don't have to make decisions like that. I think we shouldn't rush this, says Staffe. How about we drive across towards the M40? It's a good spot to start from, and I know somewhere for lunch. That feels weird, says Eve. Lunch. Us. I can do weird, he says. He feels an upperness of hand in the air, can't be sure which way it will blow. Tommy walks the long, gentle path up from Demorna Cove. He carries Giselle, cupped in one arm, as easy if she were a sweater he had taken off. The sun is hot on the side of his face, and as he rounds the final curve by the lone ash tree, he sees the house. There is nothing romantic about the building itself. A rendered blockwork bungalow with grey slate roof and a dormer window poking up. But it has a garden that peters to a slim paddock, which in turn runs quickly to the cliffs. The cliffs here are 200 feet above the ocean. Sheer. The wooden fence between the paddock and the cliff edge fails in places. And because of the way the sea has met the land for millennia, Emily can enjoy views all the way along the coast from north to south. Her plot is on a promontory, and she can see all the way from Kelsey Head to Navax Point on a good day. And on a bad day, all she can hear is the rush of the sea and the gulls above. Tommy has done all right by her. Emily stands at the garden gates to meet them. She sees Giselle 3 times a year, when Sabine Given goes visiting her mother in Rouen. Sabine doesn't know Tommy brings Giselle here, nor can she ever. The trouble is, Giselle is now of an age when she will begin to tell tales. It has to stop. Giselle's development prohibits her seeing her mother ever again from today. Of this, Emily knows nothing. Tommy holds Giselle to the sun like a trophy, and he brings her quickly down, presses a thick kiss into her pudgy cheek. She smells of ice cream. He holds her out to Emily, says, "Has Natalie called yet?" Emily nods. Giselle says, "Natalie." Tommy says, "You didn't tell her I was going to be here." Emily shakes her head ruefully. She looks guilty. Or is she ashamed? Either way, to comfort herself, she pulls Giselle close to and squeezes her, says, "Auntie Emily loves you."
"Calm it," says Tommy.
"So much,"
whispers Emily, turning, carrying Giselle to the house. It's enough to make her cry. What actually makes her cry is the truth of the matter, knowing that Tommy has every right, knowing that if it wasn't for Tommy and Nat, she wouldn't even have these stolen days. Regardless, it doesn't make it enough. People can change their minds.
"Let's make a cake,"
she says to Giselle. From the kitchen, Emily watches Tommy drag on a cigarette. Her stomach won't be still. It's not too late to tell Natalie not to come. Why would Tommy not want Nat to know he's here? That's something to fear in itself. Time was, Tommy and Nat were kind of friends. From what Nat had said, that bond is well and truly on the fray. Tommy stands at the bottom of the paddock and flicks his cigarette over the edge. He looks out to the sea. It is calm, but you can hear the waves crash. There is a precipitous sheep track down to a sea-locked cove directly below. They call it Dead Man's Cove. He has done the descent once, but it scared him half to death. There are 2 sections of scree where you have to go on your backside and clutch onto tufts of grass where you can. Here you're a long way from everywhere. Nowhere is half a mile down the road. The other way, the village of St. Agnes is a mile off. He turns 90 degrees and picks out the Stayman brickwork of the tin mines. You could hide someone away forever down those. He is far away here. But perversely it seems there might be nowhere to run. Sabine would say a cul-de-sac. But the place has served its purpose, and purposes change. His ears prick. From the direction of St. Agnes, a car rumbles. He legs it across the paddock to the house and down into the snicket where Emily keeps her wheelie bin and recycling containers. His Merc is in the garage. There's nothing to say he is here. He should get Giselle just in case. But it's too late. He waits. The tyres grind gravel. The engine stops. The handbrake grates. Then silence. He waits for the slam of a car door or the flip of a boot. But there's nothing. The engine ticks a while, then only the gulls and the sea. Staffe hangs up his mobile and picks at his lunch. He has rack of lamb, but the flesh of the meat is overdone and the dauphinoise potatoes are gloopy. He looks across at Eve, who is eating a piece of sea bream daintily. It reminds him of someone playing the game Operation, trying not to make a false move. They're in the garden of a pub by the higher reaches of the Thames, which appeals to him very much. It makes him feel connected. All his life he has never been far from this old father. In Surrey, and when he was at Merton College up in Oxford, and now his office in the city. From his flat in South Ken he can run it in 5. He checks that his phone is turned on. Alicia Flint had said that there was no sign of Tommy Given's Merc.
Merseyside police are watching the obvious roads onto the Wirral Peninsula, both from the city and also along the trunk roads up from Chester and the M56. The major junctions too. He thinks he might have upset her by asking was she sure that she'd taken the particulars correctly. He had repeated all the germane information to her, and she had sighed. Digital tones sing a tune he can't name, and he reaches for his phone. But Eve holds out her hand, and with the other drops her fork. She reaches into her bag, panicking. "Oh, my God," she says. He realizes Eve must have different ringtones for different people, and says, "It's her, isn't it? It's Natalie." Eve looked at her handset, as if it might detonate. "Answer it," he says. "Is it Natalie?" "It's a text." She presses a couple of buttons with the perfect nail of her thumb, and she nods. "We have to call her. She's got her phone switched on." He reaches for the phone, but Eve leans away and says, "Let me read it, at least." Her eyebrows pinch together, and her lips move ever so slightly as she reads the text. "Here." Eve hands him the phone and picks at her fish with her fork. She does it harshly, and takes a big mouthful. Has to reach into her mouth with her fingers for a bone. Staffe reads, "You must tell them what you need to. I'll be fine, don't worry. This is what I have to do. You know me. I'm in Cornwall 4 now, but phone going off. This is my piece. E. I love you. X." He says, "What does she have to do?" Eve shrugs. "What do you think?" "She's in Cornwall." "Where?" "She's never told me." "But she knows you know she went there. She's with Emily Bagshot." "I don't know." Staffe works his way out of messages, clicks through the menu that offers him the opportunity to call Natalie Stafford. He presses, waits, and hears that the device is turned off once more. "She won't answer." "And you won't tell me where she is." "Believe me, if I knew I would. She never says she'll be fine. She always says the worst. I'm afraid for her, Will. What shall we do?" "How will she find peace?" "Peace for Emily, maybe. Or peace for herself. From what you say, she's never got over what happened." Eve stares towards the river. "I dread to think what she might do. Sometimes she's so full of hate. Full of something not her. Perhaps she's getting rid of that." Staffe trolls the reasons Nurse Natalie might go to Cornwall. To see Emily Bagshot, the girl she knew from Yorkshire, and the girl she helped to abduct. That her child be placed in the custody of the hitherto childless Tommy Given. Or is it so many red herrings? What he knows for sure is that once you are within the compass of Tommy Given, you dance to his beat. You stay put, should he say so. He calls Josie and gives her Eve and Natalie's mobile numbers and the time of the call, and Eve's network. Tells her to get a trace on Natalie's mobile, then liaise with the nearest CID. He feels helpless. Thinks north for Yorkshire, and northwest for Merseyside, thinks southwest. Suddenly his world is larger, even more unnavigable. The Thames flows by, the same as it ever did, and he puts his knife and fork together with no choice but to go with the flow. 35. Natalie puts her phone in her pocket and leans towards the windscreen and looks up at Emily's house. Sees that the light above the porch is on even though it is daylight. It is the sign that Tommy Given is still here, and for a moment this makes her afraid. She reminds herself that there is no other way. The world has to be put back the way it was, but even so her hands tremble.
She must be strong. For Emily. For that atonement. She checks that the back seat is left down a little, to allow air to pass into the boot, where baby Samuel Degg is wedged in tight in his Moses basket, just the tiniest dose of Phenogen in his last feed. He sleeps soundly, silently. Everything she could prepare is done. In the pocket of her loose-fitting jacket are a scalpel and a syringe. In each of her trouser pockets she has a small canister of mace. She takes a mobile phone from the glove compartment, bought at the services in Bodmin and honed for emergency services, just requiring a single light press of the green. She leaves the keys in the ignition. She steps out, smells the ozone. The sea air gusts her hair. The front door is slightly ajar, as Emily said it would be. They have taken all reasonable precautions, have secured an element of surprise, but that is all. She knocks and goes into the hallway with one movement, and Emily appears from the kitchen with Giselle in her arms. They each have flour on their arms, and Giselle's hands are gooey with cake mix. Natalie says in a stage whisper, "Ah, this is how it should be. Where is he?" Emily hugs her one-time friend, her one-time captor. Natalie is a few inches the shorter, has an angelic face, but Emily is, as ever, afraid of her. It's the way it has always been, since what happened to Natalie. Nat only recently told her all about it. It's what softened Emily's heart almost enough to completely forgive. Emily whispers into Natalie's ear, "He's out in the garden, over by the cliff. Can't we just go?" Natalie looks beyond Emily, her eyes opening wide as if she's seeing a ghost. Tommy Given is in the doorway, holding up the keys to Natalie's car. He says, "You should be more careful. It's a criminal world, you know, even here." Giselle reaches out from her mother, holding her hands towards Tommy, saying, "Papa! Papa!" Natalie feels peculiar as she goes across to Tommy. She makes it appear that she's happy to see him, goes up on tippy-toes and kisses him on the cheek. And she is, actually, pleased to see him. This feels right. It feels as if it is the end of a chapter, a whole story, perhaps. She takes Giselle from Emily, the way only a nurse can, and she hands the toddler to her supposed dad, rubbing her nose into the infant's neck en passant and making the beautiful little girl giggle hysterically. "Pleasant surprise, Tommy?" "Have you got Samuel?" "I've got the kettle on," says Emily. "Giselle and I were making cakes. They've just gone in the oven." Tommy says, "You didn't tell me you were coming to see Emily." "I tried to. You're a hard man to get hold of." "I don't have any missed calls." Natalie raises her eyebrows and flicks her head backwards, as if drawing a line all the way back up the A30. "It's turned into a damn mess, and that's for sure." He goes into the kitchen and sits on a bar stool at the breakfast bar, appears to relax. "I've handled worse. It just requires a little direct action. I asked you about the boy." "Samuel," says Natalie. "He's with Leslie." "What?" "Who else could I trust?" "But he's fine. He's ready to go just as soon as you say." She smiles at him, as if she might be about to tell him they've found a little something, but that the prognosis is not all bad. Nobody knows about him still. He is a secret, right? Tommy looks at Emily, as if he might be determining her fate. "I'm getting a bit concerned about Crawford." He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a copy of the news. On the front cover is a remarkable likeness of Giselle. It is a pen-and-ink rendition, and the child has a hand upon her shoulder. The wrist to the hand has a fat Rolex wrapped around it. As Tommy holds up the image, his Rolex slumps, heavy. Who's that look like? It could be any 3-year-old little girl, says Nat. Yeah, right. Above the photograph, the headline is, Do you know this child? And in smaller print above the article, Who breathed the life into this girl? Tommy says, There's been nobody snooping, has there? Emily shakes her head like a scolded child. I swear, Tommy, not a dicky bird. I keep myself to myself down here. They don't even know. Know what? There's nothing to know. You're not a mother. You... He transforms his voice to a hiss, turns Giselle away and puts a hand over her ear. You didn't want this life. Remember? And this is all it takes to turn Emily to tears. Her shoulders shudder, and she reaches for the work surface. She says, I... Natalie goes to her, tut-tutting at Tommy. She wraps her arms around Emily, and her suspicions as to why Tommy came here are confirmed. Let's not upset Giselle, hey, hun? Emily says to Tommy, Thanks for bringing her to see me, really, I mean it. Natalie rubs Emily's back. Distantly, a faint cry emerges. The cry is painfully young and muted. Natalie freezes, stops rubbing Emily's back. What's that? Tommy raises a finger to his lips. What the hell is that? He walks quickly out of the kitchen, and the two women holding each other listen to him leave the house, going towards the car. Emily whispers, Oh, my God! Why did he come? Really, why did he come? Do you know something? You have to do what I say, Emily. Exactly what I say. He said no harm will come to me ever. He promised me. Everything's closing in, Em. We have to do what we said. Natalie takes out a tiny canister, the size of a mouth spray. Get it into his eyes. Don't hesitate. I'll say, for the love of God. She takes Emily by the shoulders and shakes her. For the love of God. And then you do it. You don't hesitate, right? Emily nods, wiping her eyes. She takes the mace from Natalie and looks around. Where's Giselle? Where's he taken her? Emily's face is drawn and bloodless. She looks as if she might faint. He's gone to the car. The boy is in the car. He's taken Giselle. He'll be back. You have to concentrate. If you're here, for the love of God, you do it. You hear? Emily's eyes glaze over, lose all focus. She drops the mace and her knees go. She slumps to the floor, and Tommy comes in carrying the boy, Samuel, swaddled in a crocheted blanket. Natalie had made it with her own hands. What the hell were you thinking? Shouts Tommy, coming into the kitchen, holding the baby boy and leading Giselle. His family, a kind of flesh and blood. Natalie says, I had to bring him. Aren't you pleased? Why would you lie? He was in the boot, for the love of God. Emily looks up startled. She mouths the words, for the love of God, and tries to stand, but she falls back to her knees, slipping on some cake mix. She looks up from the floor, holding up the canister of mace, her finger on its top. No! Shouts Natalie. Tommy is holding the boy. He pulls him close to his chest and lets go of Giselle's hand. He stares at Emily, who is holding the mace, looking at Tommy. Then Giselle. She reaches out for her daughter and pulls her away from Tommy. Giselle screams, Papa! With the baby Samuel in his arms, he advances slowly towards Emily, saying, What is that? What the hell have you got? Emily shakes her head, tries to talk but cannot. She staggers to her feet, her hand held out before her, pointing the mace at Tommy's face. With her other hand, she keeps a tight hold of Giselle. As calm as sun rising, Natalie advances towards them, saying quite serenely, Emily, what on earth are you thinking? As she gets to within a yard of them,
Tommy gives her a sidelong glance. Emily says, "I'll do it." Her finger is on the button of the spray. "All I care about is my baby. Just her." "Papa!" cries Giselle. Tommy holds Samuel, his large hand splayed on the baby boy's chest, his other hand reaching into his pocket. In this moment, Natalie feels calm, as if the breath in her lungs is ice. What she does next reels away from her, as if she is someone else, as if it is also not just Tommy she is doing it to. Fast as a card sharp, and with a peacemaking smile broadening across her mouth, Natalie flicks her right hand from its pocket and sprays a fine jet at his face. Samuel squeals, and Tommy puts a hand to the boy's eyes. Natalie takes another step and sprays a longer blast straight into Tommy's eyes. Tommy screws up his face and steps back, holding Samuel's face to his chest and pulling a knife from his pocket. Emily clutches her daughter to her bosom, edges away as Natalie moves closer to Tommy, reaching into her pocket. Tommy blinks manically and forces his eyes to stay open. He gets Emily firmly in his sights. "Say goodbye." "Watch the child!" shouts Natalie, moving out of his eye line and stooping behind him. She holds the scalpel as firm as she can, swipes at the back of his knee. She can hear the material of his trousers being scored, then the ping of his tendon being cut clean through. His knee gives way, and Tommy slips towards the floor like a drunk. Natalie monitors his movements, calculates her next move. She could go for the other leg the way she planned. "Papa?" says Giselle, softly confused. Tommy is on one knee, and blood streams down his leg, beginning to pool on the floor. His face is flexed in agony, and his eyes are blood red. He draws back his knife, trying to turn to face Natalie, but she keeps moving, arcing away from him, reaching into her pocket again. Natalie takes a firm hold of the syringe, pulls the plunger, and sizes up Tommy's neck. As he twists round, flailing with his blade, still holding Samuel, she stabs the needle into his neck. He swivels. She goes with it, pressing the plunger in. She looks away from the syringe and watches as he topples back. She looks into his eyes, can savour this moment. She has stopped the big, strong bully of a man in his tracks. Little old her has brought the ogre down, and she takes a half-step closer, like a matador in the eye of a kill, watching him writhe. His eyes grow heavy. The evil smile evaporates from his face, and he slumps back to the ground, lies on his back, still holding Samuel, his flesh and blood, to his chest, until his grip releases, and his arms flop by his side. "Get the children to the car." Natalie picks Samuel up and hands him to Emily. She takes her car keys from Tommy's pocket and tosses them to Emily. "I'll be there in a minute." Emily says, "Thank you." Natalie turns on each of the 4 gas hobs. "Hurry!" "We're even, Nat." Natalie says, "No, we can never be even." She watches Emily go and waits for the gas to hiss and fill. She closes all the windows, but leaves the door from the kitchen to the hallway open. At the bottom of the stairs, on the window ledge beside the front door, is a church candle, just as Emily had said. She lights it, says a prayer for the souls of the children and Emily and herself. Then she closes the front door behind her, careful that there is no draught. Part 5. 36. Leslie Crawford holds Zoe. They're on the sofa beneath the window that looks out across the marshes to where the estuary once flowed free and wide. Zoe is running a temperature. The baby has knocked out the last seal between it and the world. Now it is a question of the baby's will versus the membrane and muscle of its mother. Zoe is pleading to be taken to the hospital,
But Leslie knows best. She really does. The vote is coming, and they can stay put. They must. Leslie Crawford strokes Zoe with a steady rhythm, running her fingers through the young woman's hair. In her other hand, she fingers the buttons of her phone, flitting between Natalie Stafford and Nick Absalom. It is her time. She presses for Natalie, and when it is answered, she says, "You must come quickly, the baby's on its way. She's had her show and the waters have gone." "Yes, I know. I know. If anything happens to this baby, we will all be ruined. Trust me." Natalie says, "We're done here. He is gone." Leslie Crawford says nothing. She knows you can't be too careful, but as she hangs up, she gasps. The delight is deep and true, like nothing else she has known ever. Natalie hangs up her phone. The baby blue Beetle is parked up on a sea road verge above the tin mines between St Agnes and Porthauen. It is pointed towards the road to Truro and the A30. In 2 hours, with the following wind, they can be on the M5. Emily is alongside her, holding Giselle, who has stopped crying. Natalie holds the orphan Samuel, who, like his baby sister Grace, has survived his parents, Sean and Kerry. Together, they see a flash of light. Behind it is the mighty roar of the bungalow beside the sea. A giant, mythical lick of smoke plumes the Cornish air, and flames emerge. Natalie empties her pockets and regards the syringe and scalpel, instruments designed to save a life. She wipes them clean and tosses them into the hedgerow. But as she does, another roar rises from the field beyond. The diesel fumes of a tractor poison the air, and the machine drives along the edge of the field, the farmer taking a peek. They get in the car quickly. We'll drive sedately to the A30, and then they'll floor it, all the way to Merseyside and a more northern shore. "I'm afraid," says Emily. "Afraid," says Giselle, who has stopped crying now and looks up adoringly at her mother. But her eyes flit. For a moment she appears lost, then found again. "But I'm alive. I feel alive," says Emily. "Did he see us? That farmer?" "I told you Leslie will save us. This is what she's planned. It's her life's work." "Is she as clever as you say?" "Oh, yes," says Natalie. Staffe is paying the bill for lunch. Eve has kicked off her shoes and has turned her chair so she faces the sun, away from him. His phone rings and he sees it is Absalom. He stands and walks towards the bank of the river as calmly as he can. "Why can't I hear?" says Eve. He ignores her and says softly into the handset, "What is it?" Absalom is plainly excited, and even from here Staffe can tell that the reporter is choosing his words carefully. "I'm on my way up to Merseyside. She's called. Something's going to happen." "The vote on Vernon's bill is tomorrow." "Everything adds up." "Where did she say for you to go?" She didn't. She'll call again, is what she said." "We had a deal, remember." "You know as much as I do, but she said not to call the police, and I feel bad even talking to you, Staffe. But we had a deal. I'm honouring it. Listen." But the phone is dead. He calls Alicia Flint, tells her to get her plainclothesmen up to Parkgate. He doesn't know exactly where, and they should redouble their surveillance of the roads. All he can say is that they need to look out for Tommy Given's Merc. He is aware that his information is vague, not exactly up to date. "Hang on," he says, walking back to Eve. "What car has Natalie got?" "It's a Beetle, the new sort, it's blue, baby blue," which he relays to Alicia Flint. He calls John Bohr,
tells him to search for Nicholas Absalom's vehicle details. He recalls being followed down to the Lambs and says he thinks it's a T-plate Beamer. And he gives Johnbore the number of Alicia Flint, tells him to call her first with the vehicle details. It could not be more urgent. When he looks back, Eve Delahunty has stood up. She is stepping into her shoes, ready to go. He gets to the Peugeot first, reaches under the mat and removes the tracking bug device, scuttles to the patio of the pub and pops it under a plant pot. Dan Carlyle sits in his favourite chair in the upstairs room he calls his study. His wife, Lovina, knows not to come in here. He stares blankly into the tree-lined street. This is Fulham. This is where, for £1.1 million, you can live in a terraced house not so far from the seedier realities of London town. If Dan were to look in the third drawer down of his reproduction writing desk, he would see that the Building Society had statemented his debt on this place at £700,000. In troubled times, this makes his shoulders stiffen. At the back of the very same drawer, he keeps his kit, his needles and his tourniquet, and a couple of bags. He wants it now. In the morning, the banker's drafts could be discovered missing. He can hear Lovina at the other end of the landing. Even though it is only 6 o'clock, she is persuading Luke to sleep. She told Dan earlier, when he came home unexpectedly early, that Luke has had a good day. Dan had held his beautiful boy who will never be right. Lovina was in the kitchen, preparing the paste for a Thai green curry. The other children were in the family room, between the kitchen and the landscaped garden. Luke had looked up at his father and squeezed him tight, had planted a kiss on his father's cheek. It was the moment when Dan had decided to get clean, to come clean. The noises from along the landing subside, and he stands, opens the door to his study, and turns his chair to face out of the room. He sits, waits for his wife. When she emerges, he says, "V," and raises his index finger to his lips. Lovina smiles, and she mimes a tiptoe, comes towards him. His heart beats fast. Outside it is sunny. The whole evening is ahead of them. Dan has calculated all his options. He can afford to take a small place in Acton, or maybe further out while the dust settles. This house will need to be sold. Lovina can take the equity and buy a smaller place. He doesn't know if he will ever get another job. It is the end of his gifted life. "What is it?" she whispers. He reaches out, pulls her onto his lap. "This is nice," she says. She kisses him on the mouth. "A nice surprise." She puts the flat of her palm to his cheek and says, "Sometimes I feel like I'm losing you, like you're somebody else." He swivels on the chair and reaches down, pulls open the third drawer down. She looks down, sees the mortgage statements. "We don't need such a big place." He reaches to the back of the drawer and pulls out a syringe, the tourniquet, and the 2 bags. Lovina gasps. "You can have the house," he says. "What are you talking about?" "I'm in trouble, V. I've done something stupid. Don't tell me. I'll lose my job." "Is there not a woman?" He thinks, Christ, if only it was. "No, it's not a woman." "I won't let you go." "You don't understand." "But I can." She reaches across and picks up the syringe, the tourniquet and the bags. "This isn't the problem, it's what it covers up. We can fix that." He nods his head. "But it's too late." "Tell me. I'll help you." He doesn't dare look at her. He presses his face against her breast and squeezes her tight. She rubs his back, tells him it will be fine, just fine, as if he is a child. When he has told Lavina everything, Dan Carlyle says he will phone his boss. He says he wants to do it here in his own study, alone. "Oh, no, I have to be here when you tell him." He nods and makes the call. It rings and rings. He thinks it is too late and will ring to answer phone, and maybe this is God telling him there is a chance for second thoughts. "Hello," says Finbar Hare. "It's Dan Carlyle." "Can this wait? I've only just got in. I've a shower running." No." Dan's head is fuzzy, and he doesn't know how he will be able to find the words. "I've been an idiot, Finn. Someone found out I've been an idiot and... Christ, it's a mess." "Is this to do with work, Dan?" "You'd call it blackmail." "What have you done?" "I use." "What? Like crack?" laughs Finbar. No, heroin." "What? What the fuck? What have you done, Dan? Have you done something for them? Is it a dummy account?" "It's a lad from the post room. Christ, Finn, I think he's a gangster or something." "Jesus." The line is deathly still. When he talks again, Finn's voice has changed. He sounds like a parent, like a small miracle might have happened. "Tell me everything, and we'll see if we can fix it. You're one of us, Dan. You're not the enemy. He's the enemy, and we're the ones in the bloody gang. Our gang wins, right?" With this, Dan can't say anything at all. The words he wanted to say clash in his head, collide in the top of his throat. Lavina takes the phone. She says, "Mr. Hare, this is Lavina Carlyle." "What's he done, Lavina?" "There's a book of drafts gone missing. Dan says they're going to be used tomorrow. He says you can put a stop on them. But this young man has them. He's new and he works in the post room. And his name is..." "Jadis," says Finbar. "Jadis Golding." "Should we go to the police?" "No. Leave that to me. Tell Dan to come in tomorrow like nothing happened. Tell him to come see me at 9:30. "Thank you, Finbar." "Look after him, Lavina. And prepare for the worst. That's always best." Knutsford Services is like any other. Staffe brings back the coffees, passing through the cordon of smokers. Eve is leaning against his car. "How far?" she says. "I got you a white with 1 sugar. You were asleep. I didn't want to wake you." She says, "It's how I take it." "We're an hour away." He looks for the sun. "Should still be light with a bit of luck." "Where will we stay?" "And there's a hotel." "And it's by the sea. Should be nice." The smile disappears from her mouth. She must remember the situation she is in. The coffee working. Staff's phone goes, and he answers, expecting it to be Jumbo with Absalom's vehicle details. "A right fine mess." "What, Finn?" Staffe backtracks quickly to what he thinks he might have witnessed yesterday in the vicinity of Peerless Street. "It's not Jadis, is it?" "Christ alive, Staffe. It's a whole fucking portfolio of things, but yes, Jadis Golding is up there in the bastard van." "How?" "He's blackmailing one of my directors. He's got hold of a book of bankers' drafts that could cost us a bucketful, and..." "What is it, Finn?" "I'd take care of this myself, Staffe, if I could. I really would. I put a stop on the drafts, but I have to let the police know. The fraud office, you know." Oh, of course. Staffe watches the wagons thunder up the M6. It is rush hour and the traffic flows free but dense. So much going off in the nation, hither, thither. Jadus amongst so many lost souls. I'm sorry. I don't want it to be embarrassing for you, Will. What? I can let the fraud office know. I'm going to do that right now, but you should come round. Come and have a drink. I need a couple of men to watch my director's house. Really? This Golding. He's blackmailing my man. Oh, shit. I'm up north, Finn. I can't put this under the carpet. I know. Staffe looks at the wagons again. They go both ways, trundling north, trundling south. Natalie had let Emily take the wheel from Gloucester, but she had taken it back again before they got onto the M6. She's tired, but it is more fatiguing to be the passenger. In control again, she feels free, less prone to chance. Leslie Crawford made another call to see where they are. The bright woman's waters have gone, and Natalie can't help herself dwelling upon the rights and wrongs of that case. Nonetheless, Natalie will bring the child into the world, will make it survive. How come you're so calm, Nat? Emily has seen the first sign for Liverpool. There's nothing to worry about. Not now he's out of the way, it'll come to fruition. That's what Leslie says. She likes fruition. She turns to face Emily, her eyes open wide, as if it is truly a good thing she has done. Emily wants to believe that, after all this time, what she suffered those years ago will be irrefutably for the good. What they've done today, and will do tomorrow, will be for the better. Is the baby going to be fine? Natalie nods her head. She pats Emily on the thigh and turns the music up a little. It is a song from a few years ago by Lauryn Hill. Oh, this is To Zion, do you know it? Lauren, baby, use your head. But instead, I chose to use my heart. Oh, I don't like it, says Emily. It's too deep. Natalie turns it off. Emily turns it on again. Oh, but it's good. And you like it. We'll go this way, says Natalie, taking the M56. It's the junction for Ellesmere Port we want. Keep an eye out. Above, a souped Volvo sweeps down onto the slip road, slots into the middle stream of traffic 3 cars back from Natalie Stafford's baby blue Beetle. In the passenger seat, the DS removes the monocular from his right eye, says, "Looks like 2 women, and 2 baby seats in the back, occupied."
End of Disc 8. Disc 9.
37. Nick Absalom's clapped-out Beamer roars past junction 19 in the fast lane. Staffe boots his Peugeot down the slip road, and Eve says, "Where's the fire?" He says, "We're about to find out." The second item on the news roundup reminds them both that tomorrow Vernon Short's controversial bill is up before the House. Eve says, "How could Natalie be mixed up in something like this?" He thinks of something his father once said to him. Things that go away by themselves can come back by themselves. What? It's like most crimes, there is an irresistible force. Sometimes there's too much love, too much hate. Sometimes people just need the money, or are caught up in situations that won't go away. Usually, there's no choice. I had a choice. Did you? They are up with and following Absalom's Beamer, and now the reporter cuts across 2 lanes. His brake lights glow red in the early dusk. He's taking the M56. Staffe backs off, lets him get 2 cars ahead. He calls Pulford, is told that he's down in Fulham with Josie, and that they have an eye on Dan Carlyle's house. The instant he hangs up, Staffe receives another call from Alicia Flint. Our car has followed Natalie Stafford into Parkgate. We're on standby, but there's no sign of Given. Oh, I'm sorry, hang on. Our car's calling in. You want to hang on? Staffe waits for Alicia Flint to take her call. Says to Eve, I think Natalie's up ahead. Staffe, says Alicia Flint, they're in Parkgate, parked up on a track that leads to a disused water tower. It's all locked up, but it seems as if the driver knows where there's a key. She's letting herself in through the gate. The line goes silent. They're driving in. My team is holding back. There's no track beyond the tower. There's no way out of there. Are you sure? 100%. I'll be there in half an hour. Up ahead, Staffe sees the sparkly afforestation of the towers of the Stanlow oil refinery, lit up like something from James Bond in the gathering dusk. The smell of petrol is overwhelming, sweet, tacking to the nostrils. The main news runs Vernon Short's forthcoming bill as the lead item. There has been minor skirmishing at Breath of Life marches in Swansea and Sheffield. We should be working on the Degg case, not stuck here, says Pulford. We need to track Tommy Given down and get Bridget Lamb in again. I know, says Josie, but Staffe was adamant. He said, I know, our bloody lives depend on keeping a lid on this Carlyle bloke. He works for that firm Staffe's mate runs. I still don't get it, says Josie. She switches the radio off and follows a set of headlights coming towards them. The car is a jeep, and it slows to a crawl, even though there are no other cars coming down the residential street. Look, Pulford, she hisses. It's slowing down. The jeep pulls up outside Dan Carlyle's house, and Pulford reads out the number. YG10 EGB. Someone's getting out. Though the car is still moving, the passenger door opens and a man in a hooded tracksuit top steps into the road, running alongside the car. He reaches back with one hand, then hurls something at the house. The downstairs window smashes. The man is back in the car, and 3 fresh lights come on in the house. Shall we follow the car? The jeep's taillight fade. Pulford's car is facing the wrong way. Let's make sure they're safe. We'll call the plates in. Come on, let's see what they threw, but take it easy. As they advance slowly towards the house, a neighbour comes to her door, and Josie shouts for her to get back inside. More lights come on in the Carlyle's house, and Pulford is at the door knocking. He calls, "Police!" A desperate-looking man opens the door. He looks afraid. He seems broken and walks heavily into the room where the window is smashed. At the top of the stairs, 2 children peer around the newel post. In the lounge, a woman is on her knees, a piece of paper in her hand. Beside her, a house brick is on the solid oak flooring. Glass, like diamonds and blades, is all around her. "Be careful. Don't move," says Josie, reaching out for the piece of paper. It says, "Lose your nerve, lose your boy," written in marker pen. The woman looks up towards her husband, who is standing in the doorway. She says, "Dan, what have you done?" Natalie parks the car as close to the water tower as she can. Hawthorn bushes have overrun the driveway, and Emily struggles to get through to the front door without scratching herself or Giselle. She waits for Natalie, who has padlocked the gate behind her and is putting the key back in its place. Natalie reaches into the car for Samuel, and she carries him with the nonchalance of a professional towards the front door, which opens. At last! Emily starts, turning quickly, afraid. Leslie Crawford stretches her arms out towards Giselle. Emily holds the little girl's hand tighter. Let her come, says the woman in the doorway. Her hair is cut in a severe bob, and her makeup is too harsh, quite inexpert. Her eyes are kind. Let her, says Natalie. What's happening? Says Emily, holding Giselle away from the woman in the doorway. I'm Leslie. I helped save her. Crawford steps down from the doorway and puts a hand on the back of Emily's head. She strokes her hair. Some might say I saved you also. For a reason she cannot understand, Emily ushers Giselle towards the woman, who takes the child in her arms and turns, goes into the building, talking to the girl as if she were an adult. It is a little cold in here, but we'll get you wrapped up warm. You can see the sea in the hills, and there's a heron. Do you know what a heron is? Giselle shakes her head, quite vociferously, in precisely the same manner as her mother. Natalie takes Zoe Bright's temperature, then tells her that she needs to remove her pants. Leslie Crawford sits beside Zoe, leaning back on the sofa. She rests the baby Samuel on his chest, on her bosom. The boy is strong, and he breathes evenly, on the edge of sleep. At her feet, Giselle stands inquisitively with her hand on the baby's bottom. She's been quietly chastised for poking him in the ribs and face. Now she understands he is weaker than her, that she must help the other women protect him. If the baby were left to its own devices, it would soon come to harm. Not like you. You're a big girl, Leslie Crawford had said. All the time she has been here, Emily Bagshot has barely said a word. Fate has put her in this room with the two women who made her captive those years ago. But her daughter is here too. Chances are they can remain together now. What precisely are the chances? She tries to calculate, but it is too complex. She's fully dilated. It's coming, says Natalie. The contractions are all there, says Leslie, pointing at a sheet of paper on the floor beside Zoe. Her phone beeps text. What happens now? You're 30 weeks, right? Zoe nods. It's too soon. It's a strong fetus. We'll be fine. I need help. I need to be in a hospital, I keep telling her. Zoe grabs Natalie by the arm. She hisses, You're a nurse. Tell her. Tell her. We know what we're doing. Natalie smiles at Leslie. It is nearly time. He's 5 minutes away. Who is 5 minutes away? Says Natalie. What's happening? We're going to show the world, is what's happening. Baby Samuel writhes in Leslie's arms. He arches his back, his legs stiffen, and he roars. He roars with a deep voice and stretches out his arms, punching Leslie in the face. He looks around with half-closed eyes and slumps back to her bosom, to his slumber. Now, tell me what has happened to Given. Let me do this, says Natalie. She's on all fours, peering at Zoe. Zoe clutches her stomach and cries out, and Natalie quickly kneels up. We're good to go, Zoe. She squeezes Zoe's hand. I'll be damned if we're not. She smiles. Remember the breathing? Zoe nods. She whispers between deep breaths, I want Anthony to be here. No, says Crawford, I told you this has to be my doing. He'll let the cat out, and then you'll be for it. Remember? She nods. Under her breath, Crawford says, You don't even like him. That's not the point. Crawford's phone rings and she answers, saying, The key is under a rock by the left-hand gatepost. You have everything? She hangs up, says, My God, it's going to happen. Staffe has the handset pressed to his ear, watching Absalom's lights get further and further away until they glow a brighter red and stop. he can see the outline of the water tower, which is on an escarpment at the end of the track that runs down by the side of the Marsh Tom Hotel. You can't see it from the Strand, or from any point on the Neston Road. Absalom's beamer is just 50 yards from the tower. "Did you hear me, sir?" says Pulford. "Go on." "We got a couple of uniforms staying with the Carlyles overnight. Dan Carlyle says they'll find out tomorrow that their scam won't work." "What time?" "Not before 10. Not long after." He hangs up and says to Eve, "This is it. You better book into the Marsh Tom. It will be a long night." 38. Alicia Flint and her entourage of sergeants and constables are in the games room of the Marsh Tom, down at the bottom of the beer garden. From here, if you walk just a few yards to the barbecue area, you can see the water tower. An officer, clad in black, is looking through a pair of serious binoculars, mounted on a tripod and hooked up to a laptop. Inside the games room, they are wired up with internet, and Alicia Flint is standing in front of a pinball machine by an interactive whiteboard, holding court. Staffe shows his ID and slopes into a seat at the back, listening to the briefing talk and fixing eye contact with her. Alicia Flint continues, "Natalie Stafford is in situ, and we have to accommodate the possibility that Bright's baby might have been born. Stafford is with a woman we believe to be Emily Bagshot, who may have been abducted by Leslie Crawford and Natalie Stafford 3 years ago." She looks across to Staffe. She could say, "Thanks to our colleagues at City Police for this information," but she doesn't. Rather, she reiterates the positions they hold, the fact that they have no reason to believe that either Crawford or Stafford is armed. The priority is to preserve the well-being of Bright and her baby. "One thing we must keep at the forefront of our minds is that, whether Crawford suspects this or not, she is cornered. This is the end of the line for her, and as a result, everyone in that tower is in danger. Crawford is capable of anything, and we know there are 2 children and 3 women in there with her. Their safety is paramount." For a moment, Staffe allows himself to think of how he has let down his friend Finbar, who is now up to his eyes with the latest grand plan of Jadis Golding. He feels a fool, but knows he has to hold his nerve. He checks his phone to see if there is further contact from Pulford, but there is nothing. An officer rushes into the games room. "Ma'am, there's another car drawn up at the tower. It's a man alone. He has a large bag, and he looks as if he knows where the key to the gate is. What's your call?" Alicia Flint becomes still. She says nothing. After several beats, she says, "Can we intervene?" "Yes, ma'am, we have 40 seconds. Our men are 30 yards away." The officer presses a finger to his ear. "He has the key to the gate." Staffe feels himself standing. "No!" "What?" says Flint. "He's 5'11" and 10 stone. Long dark hair and probably smoking a roll-up, dressed as if he's in a band." The officer turns to look at Staffe. "Yes." "We have to trust him." 20 seconds, ma'am." "He's a reporter. He's not with them." "So he could be in danger," says Flint, glaring fiercely. Staffe puts his head in his hands. He was expecting contact from Absalom before he went in, but even so he should know what to do. All he can think of is Giselle Bagshot and Grace's twin. He hasn't figured Inspector Wagstaff quite how he can use Absalom yet. He prays he can. "He's going, ma'am. He's through the gate and parking up. We could still stop him," says the officer. "No," says Flint. "Keep our cover." The officer says into his mouthpiece, "Stand down." Alicia Flint says, "Inspector Wagstaff, a word." She strides out into the night. Jadis Golding holds Millie close. Jasmine is clearing the dishes away, serving up ice cream. It is fish food, and Jadis's favourite. He is seldom in for dinner, and when he is, he never sticks around for pudding. Tonight, he doesn't want to go out at all. "Just stay in like a family," he had said. It made Jasmine want to weep, and it is what has made this feel like a last supper. Tonight, Jadis holds Millie, whispering the story of Chicken Licken to her. It has lulled her to sleep. Jasmine brings the ice cream. "Put mine in the fridge a while. I like it soft on the outside." "I didn't know you knew Chicken Licken." "Didn't know myself," he says. They exchange a look as she comes back with her ice cream. He thinks she's thinking about the sky falling in. Later, when Millie is properly put down, they make love. Jadis is tender, and afterwards he gets her to spoon, and he falls asleep with his hand on her belly. Jadis can sleep anywhere, even on the eve of something like this. He doesn't feel Jasmine become progressively more rigid with fear. Staffe took his medicine from Alicia Flint. She was furious he hadn't told her about Absalom, and he explained his pact with the reporter and how indebted they are to the fact that Crawford had targeted him. If he had divulged his source, Crawford wouldn't have used him. It is down to Absalom that they knew she was on Merseyside, and his presence in the tower could be to their advantage still. Outside, he looks up at the black outline of the tower against the indigo sky. He thinks he can hear the sea, but knows it must be the breeze across the reeds. There is a light on the second floor of the tower. He looks through the field glasses and homes in on the shape of Nick Absalom. The journalist reaches up above the window, reaches as high as he can. Only when he brings his hand down, empty, does Staffe realise what he was placing there. He thinks hard. He thinks of the thing that Leslie Crawford and Nick Absalom would have most in common, and he realises that Leslie Crawford is not here to hide. This is not the dead end that Alicia Flint thinks it is. Now, Absalom stands with his back to the window, pointing. He brings a camera to his eye, then lowers it. He points some more. He is directing. Staffe calls Absalom. He listens as his phone rings, and he watches the window, waiting for Absalom to reach up for his phone. But he doesn't. He pulls one up from his hip, puts it to his ear. "I can't talk." "What are you up to?" "Waiting on Crawford." Absalom looks out into the night. He raises a hand, and for an instant Staffe's heart misses. He thinks Absalom is waving to him, so he ducks. But when he looks back, listening to Absalom say, "She said she'd call me," he realises the journalist is only shielding the reflected light from his view through the window and into the dark, empty night. "We still have our deal." "Of course." "Do you have anything to tell me?" "Not yet." "We had an agreement, Nick." "You don't call me Nick." In the background, Staffe can hear a hullabaloo, can see Absalom turning inwards, moving away from the window. "Where are you, Nick? Can I hear children?" The line is dead. Absalom comes back towards the window and points some more into the room. He holds the camera to his eye again, and when he is done, he looks back into the night. The phone perched on the frame above the window is not a phone. Staffe makes his way back inside the games room. As he does, he feels an echo from a previous case. It zags in at him through the ether lightning fast. He feels wired up, has a clear picture, at long last. Vernon Short shakes the Home Secretary's hand. She wishes him well for tomorrow and looks him square in the eye as she says it. "Really, Vernon, I mean it. You've had a rough ride." "Thank you, Home Secretary." "Cathy," she says, and her mouth widens. She shows her teeth. He hasn't noticed before, but she has good teeth. He goes out into Whitehall. The light grey stone of the buildings looks almost white tonight against the indigo sky. Earlier, his father had telephoned. His father only ever calls him on his birthday and when they are short for the drag hunt. Today, his father had called him to say, "Well done." He hadn't even said "well done" when Vernon had secured the deal to save the family firm in the winter of 1987. Today, his father had asked him to come up to the club for supper. Vernon had almost fallen off his chair. As he makes his way up Pall Mall towards St. James, his pace slows. After all his time, he doesn't want to arrive. The clubs line Pall Mall like so many sentrymen, with their high ceilings and stuccoed frontages and extravagant balconies, as if their arms are crossed tight across their chests, backs straight, hearts of stone. He pauses as he climbs the steps and looks left, up to Clarence House, and a cool breeze seems to come along the street. He feels cold to the bone, recalling what Leslie Crawford's people had told him they knew about his father. Vernon wonders if he will have the courage to bring the matter up over supper. Vernon is shown up to the smoking room, where nobody is smoking, but still they sit in fours on low-slung armchairs around card tables, drinking ancient malts from thick Irish crystal. Empire remains in these four walls. Edward Short raises a hand, stands and leaves his four. He walks with a stoop, but is still an imposing figure. He is taller than Vernon, and has always been more handsome than his son. His hair is dapper long, to his collar, and combed back in thick grey-black slicks. Easy to see he would have been popular in the highest, the very highest circles, not so far away. As they eat turbot, Edwards talks easily about his day and the party down at the farm last weekend, and how Vernon really should find time to visit more. Especially now, his mother would like to see him. "My mother? Do you think of Mother when you're in town?" Edward neither blinks nor stops the tiny circles he makes in the mastication of his fish. He swallows. "You know, it's not important what is in this bill. The statute book is written on paper. It's the musculature of what precedes. That's what is important." "Father, I know the worst." Edward raises his eyebrows. "These things can be forgotten as quickly as they are found. We're in the secrets business after all. The important thing is that you keep your eye on the ball." "It matters to me." "It was a long time ago." "But it's preposterous." "Don't worry about me, or your mother. They hold it to my head, not yours." Edward sets his knife down alongside his fork, and even though Vernon is no more than halfway through his supper, a waiter comes. The plates are removed. He says to his son, "You look well on it. Look well tomorrow, regardless of the outcome. It's what people will remember." Vernon leans forward, whispers, "I don't even want this bloody bill." His father stands, pats him on the shoulder and says, "Have pudding if you want, or the stewed cheese is excellent. I'm done." Staffe is exasperated. Alicia Flint and her DS crowd him, pointing at the screen. For 20 minutes he has been pumping keywords into all the major search engines. He comes up blank. Alicia Flint says, "What makes you think there'll be something on the internet?" Staffe tries Breath of Life for a third time, this time on Yahoo. He flicks through the 231,456 results, getting little of promise. There was a case a few years ago. Absalom will remember it, and so would Crawford, I bet. It would have been around the time Emily Bagshot went missing too. Was this your case? Staffe can tell what is coming. He nods. Isn't that a little egocentric? Probably. But Absalom covered that case. He'll remember. And he's got a device up there, a receiver for a modem, if I'm right. He had to put it up high by the window. Leslie Crawford, as far as we know, is here to put a stop to the trail that leads to her. She has Zoe and the nurse, and she has Emily Bagshot. God knows where Given is. Imagine if he showed up. Crawford is in the business of saving those children, not harming. Believe me, that's the only thing that has stopped me going in there already. We can't do that, can't you see? Something terrible could still happen in there tonight. It's no time for highfalutin theories. What exactly is it that you think is going on? Staffe has an idea. Something more obscure. Something that Crawford may not think he knows about. She wants to be found out. But maybe not straight away. And not by us. He types in House of the Holy Innocents and gets millions of responses. Most of the results to the search are seemingly religious. Some relate to a Chilean novel, some to a Swedish heavy metal group. Why would she get a journalist up here if I'm wrong? Maybe he got a lead. He knew where the key was. Staffe punches in breath and innocence. This is a blind alley. We need to focus. Staffe scrolls down the first page. He double-clicks. Focus on this. Alicia Flint leans close, stares at the screen, her cheek practically pressed against his. Fuck, she says, looking at an image of Leslie Crawford, standing between Natalie Stafford, who is holding a baby just a few weeks old, and Emily Bagshot, who is holding an infant, kissing the cheek of that daughter. They're all smiling. In front of them, sitting in a low sofa, is Zoe Bright. Her face is flushed red, and she is covered in a sheen of sweat. Her eyes are wide and full of fear. On her swollen belly are the words, "Let the innocents breathe," written, it would seem, in lipstick. 39. What can you tell us of Zoe's condition? Alicia Flint asks the police doctor. He scrutinises the printouts of the photographic images posted on the internet. We need to go in. I should go in, says Staffe. I know Absalom. I have the nurse's best friend with me. You can't endanger her. She is a nurse too, and it will save her, not endanger her. She signed a consent form and an indemnity. They're not worth the paper. Alicia Flint scrutinises Staffe. There is a flicker of something in her eyes. It could be pity. I can't let you have her on your conscience. My conscience is the last thing to have on yours. And what about Zoe? I'm not going to do anything to endanger Zoe Bright. Almost every element is known. The principal doubt is Tommy Given. Staffe takes the examination paper from his jacket pocket, wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. He unfurls it as though it might be the map of a desert island. He taps the top of the front sheet. And we know Crawford's books match Zoe's, said Alicia Flint. You're going to tell me about herrings now. Staffe pulls out a tub from his hip pocket. It too is in a clear evidence bag. Roll mops, actually. You said I was going round the bend. If you go in there and something happens to Zoe or the others, that's the end of your career. He nods. I'm worried about Zoe. You saw the look on her face. She's afraid.
She's supposed to look afraid. Crawford doesn't know we have the two of them connected. She's supposed to have been kidnapped, but that expression, it's real. That's why I have to go in. I will take Eve Delahunty with me, nobody else.
Don't take her.
It will save her. And it might save her best friend. How could I not take her?
On your head,
says Alicia Flint. She nods to one of her officers, who presents Staffe with the document.
To cover me, you understand?
He signs it. I wouldn't have it any other way. His heart beats faster, and his breath becomes shorter as he goes to collect Eve, fearing the worst now, not daring to hope.
Where is the nurse? Says Bridget Lamb. The smiley one with the golden hair?
Natalie. The nurse lifts baby Grace from her cot and hands her to her aunt. Bridget's face comes to life the moment she touches her niece. Her eyes are soft, her gaze locked.
We're so short today, I don't know where she is. Sick, I guess.
Grace blinks and looks around, but her glassy gaze eventually settles upon Bridget. Malcolm stands alongside her and puts his arm around Bridget. She brings the baby higher, rests its head in the hollow between her jaw and shoulder. The baby is warm. She feels Malcolm kiss the top of her head. He tells her that he loves her. She always hoped she could love him back. Now she knows that it is better to love than to be loved.
She will come to us, says Bridget.
Oh, she must, says Malcolm. It's what is right. God's will. Still nestling Grace's head in the crook of her neck, Bridget looks up at Malcolm. She sees him in a new light.
I feel like this is what my life has been for, the path we've been on. It has been the right path. Good has come of it, Mal, hasn't it?
The instant Staffe eases shut the gate to the tower, its front door creaks open. My God, says Leslie Crawford. She looks from Staffe to his companion. There is no point coming here. We are innocent people. There have been no crimes committed here. He says, This is Eve Delahunty, a friend of Natalie Stafford. What are you doing here? Do you have a warrant? You're trespassing. I'm here by invitation. I have the papers to prove it. Come in while you show them to me.
You can't change anything. It is time.
Time is the operative word, isn't it, Leslie? I've seen your site. I suppose the plan is to make an announcement in the morning to publicise the website then, just as the MPs are chomping on their kedgeree.
How is Natalie? Asks Eve. I'm a nurse too. I can help with Zoe's baby.
If anything happens to that baby, you're ruined, says Staffe. You're ruined anyway. Leslie Crawford looks at Eve quizzically, biding her response. That remains to be seen. Eve holds up the canister of oxygen she has brought. This will help. We need to secure a healthy birth. Crawford nods. Natalie can tell you herself. Staffe walks into the entrance of the tower. As he passes Crawford, he hisses, If you don't tell me the truth, I'll go for Zoe Bright, or should I say Flanagan. Anna Marie Flanagan as she was when you were her tutor. Leslie Crawford's mouth opens. In her eyes he sees the briefest flicker of uncertainty. The room on the second floor is wide and long, improbably lit all the way to its high ceilings and out to the night. The brightness casts shadows across everybody's face, makes them like gargoyles. When he sees Staffe, Nick Absalom conjures the decency to look embarrassed, if not ashamed. Emily Bagshot is lost in her child, with whom she crouches, trying to distract. She is clearly confused by everything around her. On the floor, a baby lies in its Moses basket. Staffe goes onto one knee, says, Grace's brother. Samuel,
says Natalie. Her eyes flit, and she scratches her chin, rubs her eyes. She is calculating something and regards Eve only briefly. "I'm sorry, Nat," says Eve. "What are you talking about?" Natalie looks across at Leslie Crawford, then Staffe. "I had no choice." "They forced you," says Eve. Beyond Natalie, Zoe Bright breathes dramatically, through a pursed mouth. Her knees are slightly raised. On a blanket beside her chair is a stack of brilliantly white towels. "We should get her to a hospital," says Staffe. "You can't take her," says Crawford. "Not yet. We have a nurse. In fact, we have 2 nurses." "You had a nurse in the tunnel," he says, "but it all went wrong, didn't it, Natalie? What happened? Did you have Samuel taken to Tommy? And with Grace you were disturbed. It was Asquith, the historian." "I don't understand," says Natalie to Leslie Crawford. "Why did you bring him here?" Zoe Bright sighs loudly, then she grunts. Natalie says to Staffe, "I don't know what you're talking about, or why you're even here. This is my job, it's what I do." Leslie Crawford makes calculations of her own. "What's happened to Tommy, Natalie?" says Staffe. "Don't say anything," says Crawford. "We'll get you a lawyer, the best. We have a baby to deliver." "A lawyer? I don't want a lawyer. You never said anything about a lawyer." Staffe says, "When Emily Bagshot came to City Royal 3 years ago, you told Leslie, didn't you, Natalie? You started all this." He looks at Crawford. "How did you 2 meet?" Crawford looks at Natalie imploringly. "You'll be fine. I'll make sure you're fine." "You're going to prison, Natalie, rest assured. All of you are." He looks at Emily, says, "Not quite." "All of us," says Zoe Bright. "He means me and Natalie," says Crawford. "What?" says Natalie. "It's all right for you. You want to be a martyr." "What did you do to Tommy Given, Emily?" "Say nothing, Em," says Natalie. I was with Giselle. She's my girl, my little girl. We were making cakes." "Tommy brought her to you?" "It was an accident," says Natalie. She begins to fidget in her pockets, stepping from foot to foot, but working her way towards the Moses basket. "No!" shouts Staffe, but it is too late. Natalie Stafford has the baby, Samuel, in her arms. She has a scalpel in her hand and a look of utter desperation in her eyes. "I can't go to prison!" Zoe Bright grunts again, louder. She pulls at her hair and squeals. "It's coming! Oh, for God's sake! It's coming!" "Put down the knife, Natalie." Eve is standing in the doorway. "He's a baby. We save babies." "I saved this baby. She's betraying me. You are betraying me. Help me. Please, help me," groans Zoe. Absalom takes a photo, and Leslie Crawford goes across, snatches the camera. "When I say..." Eve takes a step towards Natalie, but she moves the scalpel an inch closer. "No," says Eve. Zoe Bright pleads, "Please, my baby's coming." Eve takes another step. Natalie puts the scalpel to the blanket by Samuel's neck, where it is pulled up to cover his head. Her bottom lip is quivering. "Let me out. Just let me out." "We have to help the new baby, Nat." Eve reaches out. Natalie says, "No, you have to help me. Me." "Nobody helps us, Nat. Remember? Remember what we said when we got the bus back that night from Leeds. We said we have to help ourselves, look after ourselves." Eve takes another step towards Natalie and reaches out. She puts a hand on her friend's hand, which holds the handle of the scalpel. The two friends regard each other as if they are alone in this room. Come on, Nat. I'll help you. Let's help the baby together. They intertwine their fingers, and Eve slowly pulls her hand away, holding the scalpel. Staffe watches the two friends hug each other. When they're done, Eve leads Natalie to Zoe Bright. He says to Crawford, "This is over, Leslie. Give me the camera." "No, this is mine. A moment of history. How can you not allow this to be documented?" "Nothing will happen until after the vote tomorrow." He looks at Absalom. "Nothing." They each look across at Zoe Bright, supported by Eve, who administers gas and air, whilst Natalie is on her knees between Zoe Bright's glistening calves. Natalie says, "Push, Zoe. Come on, sweetheart. Push." Lost in these moments. Staffe takes a hold of Crawford's arm and pulls her into the kitchen. "This is the transcript you marked for Anne-Marie Flanagan." He reaches into his pocket and pulls out the roll mop tub in its evidence bag. "And this has your prints and Zoe's. We know she's been complicit in this, and she will become as involved as we want her to be. So you play ball, you understand? For Zoe's sake." "There's more at stake than that." He holds her by the shoulders and turns her to face into the room. He whispers heavily into her ear, "These people each have a life. A life has to be lived, not just given. There's no point bringing them into the world and abandoning them. And that's what you do, Leslie. You use people. You undermine yourself. You think you are God. You can't make decisions for everyone." Natalie reaches out towards Zoe. Eve helps the mother sit up, her hair matted and her face coated with sweat. She reaches out towards Natalie. Between them, with blood on her head and her mouth agape, is Zoe's baby. It is a daughter. She tries to roar, but something is trapped inside her. She can't breathe. Zoe cries out, "What's wrong? Is she dying? Have I killed her?" Eve picks up the baby and feels her neck. She looks at Natalie, eyes wide and full of fear. Natalie takes the baby from Eve and whispers into her ear. Then she holds the baby high. The umbilical cord almost taut as she tilts the baby and pulls one hand away. "No!" shouts Zoe. Natalie raises her free hand, flattens it, and angles it to the shape of a karate chop. And fast as a flash, she brings it down, tilting the baby and tapping her back. The baby roars. "You have to let people choose," says Staffe to Leslie Crawford. "And they will. Tomorrow." "40. When was the last time you slept?" asked Josie. "Are they in there?" says Staffe, peering through the reinforced glass panel of the small room. It is off the main ward to keep germs at bay, and contains 2 cots. "Can't this wait, sir? They're going nowhere," says Pulford. Staffe runs his hands through his hair and blows out his cheeks. He summons images of his last meeting with Sean Degg. Can't escape the bad thoughts he had of him, the accusations levelled. All he did was love a woman too much. He reaches for the door, pushes it, takes a step closer to what he has to do. Bridget Lamb has baby Samuel in her arms. The baby looks up at his aunt, and hearing somebody enter, turns his head. The infant's faculties seem to have advanced in the day since Staffe last saw him, and Bridget looks different too. Her husband sits opposite the two of them and doesn't look up. He has Grace in his lap. Staffe thinks that Malcolm might know what is coming, and he has another flash memory of the young Malcolm, miserable at school. He pulls up a chair and sits alongside Bridget, who says, "You know, I can see Kerry in him, and something of myself in Grace." She rocks the baby now, but it is a disguise. Staffe can see that her hands are shaking. "And Sean?" "There's nothing of him," says Malcolm Lamb. "We can't say that," says Bridget, "but it's not what I see." There is a window beyond the cots. They are 3 floors up, and there is nothing between them and the ground. Outside in the main ward, Pulford and Josie are waiting. There is a uniformed WPC there also. At the main entrance, another 2 uniformed officers wait, and 2 more by the service entrance, just in case. "If only Kerry could have seen. If she'd have known better," says Bridget. "She should have talked to me. I could have helped. This could have been arranged properly." "Properly," says Staffe. "They will come to me, these babies," she says. "We have spoken to a solicitor, and she has consulted the authorities," says Malcolm. "Bridget is their aunt. She will be a wonderful mother to them now. It's in her blood." Staffe and Malcolm exchange a look, and Staffe's heart sinks as he says, "I'd like a few words with Malcolm." "Of course," she says, smiling at Samuel, her thumb lightly upon the baby's cheek. Staffe nods for Josie to come in. "Alone, the 2 of us," he says to Bridget. Josie comes in and takes Grace from Malcolm. "Why?" says Bridget, suddenly concerned. Josie ushers Bridget towards the door, says they should get to know each other, brother and sister. "We'll have some tea." Staffe says, "I need to talk to Malcolm about when we were young. He was there with my sister. When your parents were killed, he told me. I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too," says Staffe, watching Bridget go, Samuel in arms, and Josie beside her, holding Grace. When the 2 men are alone, Staffe takes out the wedding photo of Bridget. He can see now that it is probably no longer the happiest day of her life. "I went to see a young woman out east a little. It's where Sean was for the last days of his life. He went into a shop to buy something. Earlier he had made a telephone call." "I thought you wanted to talk about when we were young," says Malcolm. Staffe looks at the photograph of Bridget, Malcolm beside her. She is beaming into camera, and he is looking at her, a frightened smile creasing in his face, as if he can see that one day he might have to do anything for her. "Sean called a mobile number, and that mobile phone then made a call to your home." "I don't understand," says Malcolm. "You have a mobile phone, don't you?" Malcolm shakes his head. "You'd do anything for Bridget, wouldn't you? You can't give her children, though. But you could help her have Kerry's." "I'll support her however I can." "Sean ruined her." "I don't know what you're driving at." That young woman in the shop who served Sean remembered him. She remembered who else was in the shop just afterwards. I have her statement here. He holds up the photograph. He puts a finger to it. "She remembers you going in." Staffe looks at Malcolm. Says, "I remember that time at school, Malcolm, when the ambulance came." "You were there. You could have stopped that bastard." "You know how to inject. You've done it all your life, and you work with druggies down at the exchange that the church helps with. You could get your hands on it." "Hands on what?" "Sean called you on that mobile phone you say you haven't got." Staffe pulls a phone from his pocket. The device is sheathed in an evidence bag, and Malcolm's eyes hood down. "You called Bridget from this mobile, Malcolm." There are some bastards out there who are paid by the government to get convictions. They look for accessories in crimes like this. They don't like loose ends. I called to see how she was, that's all. Bridget knows nothing. She knows nothing at all about this. If you're saying you did it on your own, you'll have to tell me how. How? How is easy, Will. If you love somebody, have you ever? If you love somebody and somebody hurts them, you get a hate. You get a hate as big as the love. That's how it works, and you can't do anything else. You killed an innocent man. I brought peace to a beautiful woman, an innocent woman who had her inner being, her holiest element, taken away from her. She can be complete. I thought Sean was guilty once, but I was wrong. You killed an innocent man, a father. You said you wanted to talk about when we were young. They killed my father, my mother too. I know, and I'm sorry. And I don't doubt they had their reasons. It's not the same. It's always the same, Malcolm. It has to be. It can't be any other way. How could I bear it if they didn't have a damned good reason? Malcolm leans heavily against the wall. He looks through the window in the door, watches Bridget and her family. Can I be with them a little longer? I'm afraid not. As he says it, Staffe feels a little less decent about himself. The uniformed officers take Malcolm Lamb away. His wife is not with him as he is led away, at his insistence. Staffe cannot help speculating what his father might make of him, and the things he has to do. If only that was the end of it, says Josie. On their way out of City Royal, she hands Staffe a bound SOC printout of the forensics down at Emily Bagshot's bungalow on the Cornish coast. Where is Emily? She's had the tests to prove she's Giselle's mother, and now she's with social services. They released her from custody. We have a scalpel and a syringe found less than a mile from Emily's bungalow, both taken from City Royal. Natalie Stafford has admitted to it. Her prints were on them. And what do the Crown say about Natalie? Josie shakes her head. It'll be murder, sir. And people talk about innocence, says Staffe. What about her innocence? She's as guilty as they come, sir. Conspiracy, abduction, concealment and destroying public records, as well as murder. And finally, Emily will be with her daughter. And Rob Hutchison. They're together. You should have seen them. The happy family. But... Sir? But for Natalie's interventions. There's something else, sir. Staffe watches Malcolm Lamb being manhandled into a police car on the hospital forecourt, and he thinks about when the police came to see his sister Marie, and how he wasn't there when she was told her parents were murdered, but Malcolm and his father were. What is it? It's the bank draft fraud, sir, says Josie. We can deal with it. No. An ambulance roars up the approach road and screeches to a halt in front of them. The siren stops, and from within the vehicle a scream cuts the city afternoon. They're asked to stand aside. When the man is wheeled past, blood proliferates, from the chest of what some people would call a patient. To others, he is a victim. It could be a knife wound or gunshot. Tell me, says Staffe, did they catch anyone with the banker's drafts? Nearly, with the first. They used it to try and buy a car out in Ilford. After that, they must have got word round the gang, and it looks like they dropped the scam. Any prints on the cheque? No, but we've got a definite ID on the one who presented it. He's got a record and it's the E-gang, all right, but they've gone to ground. Have you checked Jasmine Cash's flat? Josie nods. How was she? Josie says, We can do this, sir. Staffe watches the bloodied victim disappear between the automatic doors of the hospital. Fine. What? Says Josie, and she watches as Staffe walks away from City Royal, but in the opposite direction to Ledengate Station. Staffe is a little worse for wear. He tried to sleep and knocked back a couple of stiff nightcaps, but his brain couldn't stop ticking, and now he feels even worse. Needs to do something. He had called Finbar, and is waiting for him now. It is one of their haunts of old. He drinks from his bottle of Moretti and twists on his stool at the bar of the Boss Clef. The performer is singing Lily Marlena and has a crimped bob of golden hair and blood-red lips, is wearing a basque and a tight black skirt, split all the way to her hip. It has a scarlet lining. The place is all dark, save a single shaft of light from above that picks out her sway of the song. With her golden hair, the singer reminds him a little of Natalie. Poor Natalie was borne the brunt of the charges that the CPS have brought in the abductions of Kerry Degg and Emily Bagshot, the manslaughter of the former, and the murder of Tommy Given. For her part, Leslie Crawford is copping conspiracy charges, and according to the CPS, who are talking to her brief, Jasper Rennick, she's probably facing as little as 2 years. She might even get the lot suspended. Her attachment to the abductions was opportunistic, superficial and political. Rennick has sufficient argument to pin the abductions to dead Tommy Given, and the stunt with Zoe Bright is political also, and conducted with the absolute consent of Zoe, according to the wily Jasper. Because of Crawford's testimony, Zoe Bright will probably be charged with conspiracy. When Staffe had called Alicia Flint, she had said that Leslie Crawford was cold as ice. It had made her blood boil, and when she visited Zoe, Anthony Bright had been there, holding the baby beside the hospital bed that Zoe was chained to. Alicia said, If you looked at them quick, you might think they were a family. It shows how much we know. The applause for Lily Marlena subsides, and Staffe recognises the opening chords of Shir Hatan. The singer introduces the song over the piano prelude, and he is sure he has heard these spoken words before. It is a homage to P.3, and he is sure Kerry had done this also, back in the winter when she was Lori dos Passos, and he had chanced upon her, little knowing. He could swear she had. The words drift into a verse of animals crying because they are hungry. The child cries too because he is lonely. Staffe closes his eyes, pictures Zoe Bright chained, her baby in the arms of Anthony Bright. He wonders if his love of Zoe is diminished now. He looks around the audience as the chorus belts out in Hebrew. From the dark, some of the audience join in. Penny for 'em! Finbar Hare draws up a stool alongside Staffe and orders up 2 more bottles of Moretti and large Lafroigs. I'm so sorry, Finn, says Staffe. Don't ever apologise to me, old boy. They clink. You were only trying to help someone, so don't beat yourself up about it. There's others can do that. Staffe feels a smile spread across his face. It feels alien to him. Seems as if he is a long way from himself. Finn talks across the music and drinks quickly, playing catch-up, draining his malt and ordering another for himself, a hollow legs, as he calls it. And 3 songs further into the set, he begins to muse on how he would like his evening to pan out, unable to take his eyes off the singer. He raises a glass to her, and she winks at him. Staffe doesn't know how he does it. But when he turns to the bar to take a swig of his Moretti, he sees the barmaid undressing the foil from the neck of a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, and Finn miming the action of putting it on ice. When he catches Staffe watching him, he says, "That poor bastard Vernon Short, eh? You were involved in all that, weren't you?" Vernon's bill had lost its vote by 3 bodies. He had stepped down immediately, with a smile upon his lips, and, the first time Staffe had seen this in him, a glint in his eyes. He looked like a different man, nothing like his father. He had said he was done with Parliament, and was going to see if Vines would take on his small parcel of land in Puglia. When the interviewer had asked him about Leslie Crawford, and was he involved with her political activities, he said, "Of course not. She is a maverick, and the laws of slander prevent me from being candid." The interviewer persisted, and Vernon had said, "The beauty of stepping down is I don't ever have to give fools like you the time of my day. I suggest you stuff yourself." He had thrown back his head and laughed, then walked away. As he went, you could hear the crew guffawing. "What's happened to Dan Carlyle?" Staffe asks. "We're looking after him. He's booked into the Hermitage for as long as it takes for all this to die down. Rehab's the best bastard place in the world to hide." "I'll catch up with Golding, I promise, Finn." "Don't knock yourself out. We didn't lose a penny, and the chances are it might have saved Dan Carlyle's marriage and career in the long run. You know he was hooked on heroin." Finn drains his 3rd large Laphroaig and slams the glass on the counter. "Fucking heroin, for the love of God." The singer finishes the first half of her set and comes to the bar, sits on a stool between Staffe and Finbar, and the barmaid brings across the chilled Veuve Clicquot. "I'll leave you two to it," says Staffe. "Don't go." "I know you from somewhere," says the singer to Staffe. Finn has a hand on her hip. Staffe thinks right back to the beginning of this case. Some have passed and some been born. He says to the singer, "You know the Blue Angel?" "Well, of course. I just sang something from that." Staffe says to Finn, "Thanks for trying. We're even." "No," says Finbar, "I'll never be even. Not with you." He takes his hand from the singer's hip and grips Staffe's shoulders. "And that's the bastard truth." The night is quiet, and as the door of the Boss Clef closes behind him, the music from inside shuts to almost nothing. Staffe skirts around the Old Street roundabout, making his way past Peerless. He looks up to the Limekiln Tower beyond. Jasmine is there, with Millie, her man on the run and hopes all gone to dust. For some reason he walks on up towards Flower and Dean. It is warm and his thoughts won't slow, nor can he impose any order on them. The melodies, the staccato rhythms of Brel and Schulze, the ghosts of Dietrich and Lori dos Passos stay with him, snagged. On New North Road he pauses outside a row of shops. The line about the lonely child who is hungry and cries in the night swirls like wind in a cove. He stops and he looks, feels a familiarity. These shops are run down, but they serve. There is a fruit and veg shop, a newsagent's, then 2 carcasses, a calf and a bookies, finally a hairdresser's. Cuts. He knows this place, and the familiarity takes shape. The reason he has subconsciously brought himself here becomes apparent. Above the shop, a dim light glows within, presumably from a room at the back. He crosses the road and works his way around along the narrow road that runs along the back of the shops. He counts the units as he goes, and, right enough, there is somebody in an upstairs room at the back of Cuts. He calls John Bohr and gives precise instructions, saying he wants a 1039 to Cuts on the New North Road. John asks what is wrong, and Staffe tells his sergeant it is a matter type 5. Under no circumstances must the officers get out of their car. He hangs up and waits. He thinks of what Finbar had said to him about them never being even, and how he might have changed since that sequence of events those years ago. For sure, Finbar has changed, and Staffe wonders what perverse circumstances can contrive to make a sad man happy. The squad car's response is quick, and as he hears the siren grow gradually louder, like a first movement, he wonders if he is correct, how prepared he really is. He positions himself by the back gate, and he waits. His muscles harden, and his breathing deepens. The blood pumps faster, and only now does he fear the worst. The police car is out front already, wailing, and the light in the upstairs back of Cuts flicks to black. A couple of beats, and he hears the back door open, and then a curse and heavy footfall. The bolts on the other side of the gate are shot, and the door opens inward. "Jadis," he says. "Fuck!" Jadis smells of coconut oil, and his hair is slicked back. The moon catches it, silver and black. He closes and opens his eyes, slow, makes an ironic and disparaging, slow shake of his head. "You shouldn't have." "The officers out front aren't coming, don't worry. Don't do anything stupid, it's just me and you. I want to be the one." "Not you," says Jadis. "Not you, man." "It has to be," says Staffe. Something glints in Jadis Golding's hand. "You're not taking me. Not you. Not any fucker." He sounds like a boy. A frightened boy. The gun rises, and Staffe takes a step back. All he can think to say is, "Please. You're going to let me go?" "I can't." "You have to." "You can't do that, Jadis. You can't do that to Jasmine or Millie. Put it down. Come of your own accord." Jadis shakes his head again. He is rueful, resigned. Staffe recognises the look. He thought he knew him. The sound is fearsome. He feels the sound, and it is all he feels, and then another. He was wrong. The street comes to meet him, and he can't feel the bang to his head. Just the worst stitch you ever had in your chest. He looks up, and in the indigo sky sees a constellation, close. He tries to keep his eyes open, but he can't. He feels himself being lifted and held, the warmth of a fellow man. And then he falls back to ground, but the ground doesn't come. Pain of Death by Adam Creed. Read by Jonathan Oliver.
Thank you for listening to this unabridged Oak Hill audiobook. If you'd like to listen to further titles, please contact your local library.